This one.
Okay, yeah, just pull it.
Okay.
And then somebody has to make a motion, and then you second, and then discussion.
Okay.
Okay, all right, oh my goodness. Okay. Good evening, it's 5 o'clock, and we're going to call the work session together here. And I'd just like some housekeeping items. Director Fair is absent and excused. Dr. Jewel Harmon, Chief Accountability Officer, Mr. Ben Rarick, Associate Superintendent of Finance, and Ms. Santella, Executive Assistant to the Board, will be attending the meeting via Zoom. I'd now like to call on Superintendent Vella for introductions. Mr.
Thank
Vella.
you, President Mata. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Wade Behringer, our Associate Superintendent of Strategic Initiatives and Operations. That'll begin our presentation for tonight. Dr. Behringer.
Thank you. Long time no see. President Amata, members of the board, Superintendent Vella, Ms. Antello, appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you on a different topic this evening. So, and the nice thing about this evening is I won't be up here doing all the talking. We have a very professional, experienced group of leaders that are going to be speaking throughout the evening to give you their expertise in the area of this 2023 bond work session. So I'm happy to get started on that, and I'll start us off as soon as nothing wants to move for me. Of course, I got to hit it harder.
Can I hit this?
Sure. We're admitting people. We're doing everything. Okay, so 2023 bond. Why now? Why do we need to go out for a 2023 bond? So as you probably know, we're coming to the end of our 2016 bond measure, which was promises made, promises kept. Bond measures usually last 6 to 7 years. So we are coming to that end of that cycle. We're wrapping up those projects over the next year or so and getting that taken care of. A majority of the 2016 bond measure the money was spent on Covington Elementary School, River Ridge Elementary School, KLA, as well as 9 elementary multipurpose rooms, Promethean boards across the entire district, and several other smaller projects. So that'll be important as we get into a little bit more of my particular slide here. So all schools did not have large-scale projects done to them or for them during the 2016 bond measure. Why is it important now? KSD enrollment right now, low. It's been declining for the last 4 years or so. And we have the capacity within our schools right now to be able to house all of our students. Therefore, not a need right now to build brand new buildings to house additional students because our enrollment is not up. And then also with our boundary changes, we have additional capacity for our schools when that goes through. And then therefore, there was not a need for this particular bond cycle for us to bring forward new buildings. The current state of our buildings and facilities, as many as you know, we have a lot of schools that are over the 30-year-old, OSPI recommended lifespan. We have schools that range anywhere from 40 to almost 90 years old when you think about Meridian Elementary School at 1938. So we have an opportunity right now to be able to look at all of our schools and our facilities and bring them up to a standard that is high and will allow all of our schools to be able to sustain that high level of learning environments for years to come. Because in future bonds, we'll need to build buildings to replace our older buildings, but right now, there was not that need. And even though our schools are old, between our staff and our buildings, our environmental services teams, our maintenance teams, they've done an amazing job over decades to make sure our older buildings are functioning like newer buildings, even though they might not look like it. And so that allows us to have a little bit more longevity on our lifespan for our current schools. KSD, in comparison to other districts we're a little bit behind in terms of our older buildings and making sure that they are functioning like newer buildings. So this creates an opportunity for us within this bond cycle, as well as creating a year-round usable outdoor spaces for our students, staff, and community. That's something that our neighboring districts are doing by creating synthetic multi-purpose fields for their students and their community as well. And then our focus, I've shared this before, but really our focus is to ensure that our students, staff, and community receive the safest, healthiest, most inclusive 21st century facility experience while in our schools or on our property. We want to make sure that every single school site has the opportunity to be the best learning environment for our students, all students. We want to make sure that KSD facilities are something that our current and future KSD students, staff, and residents can be proud of. Our long-range plan, as I stated, we have the opportunity right now to modernize all of our buildings, to bring them up to a high standard, because we need to do that right now, because in the future, at our next bond cycle, not our current 2023 bond cycle, we will need to build some new buildings for those older schools. But before we can build new buildings for our older schools or replace those, we need to bring all of our schools up to a standard so we're not worried about every 6 to 7 years whether or not we've gotten those schools up to a standard. And so this particular cycle allows us to do that for each and every single one of our schools. And then finally, equity, excellence, and community. Our students, staff, and community deserve facilities and learning spaces that can provide and excite students with everything that they expect to have in a new school, even if that school is not new by the year that it was built. Our schools impact our communities and encourage or deter people from seeking out Kent or Kent School District as a place to settle down and raise their family. We have an opportunity to bring all of our school facilities up to a standard that shows our students, staff, and community that we believe we are the best place for generations to come to live and to enjoy our school facilities. So with that said, I would like to hand it over to Ashley McLaren, Director of OAC, who's going to lead us through the next part of our presentation. Ashley?
Do we need to admit? Oh, another one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Thanks.
admit. There you go. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley McLaren. I'm a director at OAC. Together with the Capital Projects team and Wade, or Dr. Behringer, we walked through a process to get to the bond plan, the 2023 bond plan, in a series of 7 meetings over the course of several months. It was a very linear process, and I'm just going to spend a few minutes walking you through to tell you kind of how we got there. In the first meeting, we started to walk the group through developing a charter. And so in a small group exercise, we got to the charter of that the task force has the power to evaluate data through active engagement and input. The task force would be providing informed recommendations to the Kent School Board that create the foundation which supports students, teachers, staff, parents, and communities through future learning environments. So what that means is we really focused on having teachers and students centered in this exercise. We know and we recognize that buildings for Kent School District serves as tools for those teachers and in support of students and student learning environments. The process really is again, I refer to it as a linear process, but it's also kind of like a funnel. We start off by looking at a snapshot of all of your buildings in a high level, and then we continue to dive down into the data very specifically, and then look at district-wide initiatives overall. So what that looks like here in this graphic is, what you see here is a timeline of all of your schools, and the bar, the kind of long line, is an indication of that 30-year time span that Wade referred to earlier. And so what you're seeing here is you do have quite a collection of schools that have lived beyond that life. And all of the dots that you're seeing are major modernizations that have happened to keep those schools going and keep them active and serving as safe, warm, and dry spaces for children or students to learn. But what that doesn't tell us is specific data about each building. And so what we try to, there's kind of 3 legs to the stool, or this Venn diagram is a holistic approach. For each building, we look at the facility condition or the building condition, but we are looking at all facilities, so that's the fields, everything from the curb all the way in. And that is, so that's your walls, roofs, any system, so that's mechanical systems, HVAC, electrical security, and just how they are performing in terms of just working systems. The second point that we look at is design capacity. So this is how many students was the building made for, built for, designed for, and how many students do you expect to be enrolled in that school over time? This also, we looked at use of portables, and so how are you using portables to support those schools? And then we start to dive in a little bit to what are the programs and how have they changed? Because sometimes the capacity of the building may not change, but the program develops in such a way that the space requirements change. And then the last point is functional performance. And the definition we use for functional performance is how are the buildings serving as tools for learning? So how are they serving as 21st century modern tools for learning? So your schools are providing adequate support for your teachers, but there's a lot of workarounds that teachers have to go through. They usually operationally in older schools because they just weren't designed for with modern education in mind. Think about the difference between when you went to school or when I went to school and what education looks like now, and then we're trying to close that gap. So just to give you an assessment of your district, this is the building condition assessment, and what you'll see is that you are great stewards of your dollars. So this is pretty typical across districts where the fair or adequate rating is given to most schools. It shows you that you are taking care of business, you're taking care of your HVAC systems, your building envelopes, your roof, your windows, your walls, kind of right in that middle threshold. The green schools are schools that are a little bit newer. And then usually there is always that school that, or a couple of facilities that are on the cusp of needing a major improvement. And so here you see the green schools are either newer buildings or they're buildings that have just had recently in a past levy or a past bond some major upgrades. Secondly, so we look at permanent school capacity and enrollment. And what you're seeing here is a snapshot before your rebounding exercise about where we are in terms of capacity. And this could be high or low. So when you have lower capacity at a building, it also gets a lower rating because once you start to have a population decline, it may infringe upon the programs that you're able to provide there. So the sweet spot, as we call it, would be right in that 3 range, which is about somewhere from right around 100%, but it could go higher or lower. This is where the district, you'll see a lot more red on this map because this is where we're talking about that functional performance piece. And so when you go back to that first graph that we showed where you have the older facilities, that is saying that no matter how great you take care of your buildings, no matter in what good shape that they are in, they still aren't serving the purpose of a modern education facility. Just because they were built too long ago, they were built when education just looked totally different. And there are modifications that can be made, and there have been made over time, but they score lower on this ranking because of their age. So after the data points were collected and we looked at each, we kind of dove into what the data around each building, we then asked your district experts to come in and talk to the group about what are strategic goals across the district that every school needs to be thinking about. And so we had a series of departmental leads come in and discuss. So for instance, organizational effectiveness. And for our purposes, we really focused on IT. And so what they did for us is they came in and over a series of 2 meetings, gave presentations on their urgent needs, their current needs, and then maybe even future needs, because we wanted to keep the list of needs and ultimate costs associated with those in perspective, because knowing that there's always more projects than there are funds, we can't do everything at once, so we needed them to help us with priorities of what they were seeing, the systems that were coming to the end of their useful life. And so I won't read these, it's an exhaustive list, but just letting you know the different groups that came to present and again, presented kind of in this series of priorities. So organizational effectiveness. Oh, and I will say, we started this process by having the first conversation, and the one that framed all of the conversations around your strategic goals was really the district's need and desire to provide equitable education to all students. So all of this is in a framework of that. Our very first presentation talked about what equity means to Kent School District and what that looks like. So IT here, again, organizational effectiveness, really focused on IT. student, family, and support services. So this is really focused on student mental health and well-being, talking about with the rebounding exercise and how students will be moving from elementary schools to middle schools, and that might put a burden on the counseling services that are needed there when the population changes. And then other different space. These are all. This is not, again, a reminder. These aren't operational concerns. These are the spaces that support operational aspects of your education. Outdoor learning. So we talked a lot about your fields and courts. Here, it was really a big focus on ADA compliant pathways and bleachers, and just bringing equity across schools. So between the high schools and at the middle schools. Early learning, so we heard from your early learning team about the need for to close that educational gap that so many students show up with by the time they get to kindergarten age, and really expanding your programs and your services to those under the age of kindergarten, so from 3 on up. And this is about additional spaces to offer expanded access to the no-fee pre-K programs, and really make spaces purpose-built. You can't just use any classroom for a pre-K classroom. You have to be very specific to those needs of the littles. And so talking about how some of the capital projects could support those needs. Inclusive learning. So the district leader here talked a lot about how every student at Kent School District is seen as a general education student, and then the services need to be brought to them in their environment. This isn't about, we don't have a pull-out method, you have a push-in. And what that might look like in terms of furniture and fixtures within each classroom, ADA accessible facilities. All of your facilities are compliant. I want to be very clear about that. But depending on when they were built, there's a different level of ADA accessibility that is acceptable for compliance or considered compliant. So this is about bringing not just all of your schools up to the same standard, but all of the sites as well. Safety and security, as you can imagine, this is a very hot topic, and we went through a list of projects that would continue to improve upon the safety and security in your district. Again, Kent School District's very safe and secure, but there's always ways to improve. New equipment is always coming online. Upgrades are always necessary, so that's what these projects really centered on. So after we had all of the data for each building, and then an understanding of the district-wide goals by department, we had the group come together to vote on guiding principle, what we call guiding principles. So again, there's always more projects than there are funds, and we wanted to make sure that we established a set of rules that would help guide us as we had to make those tough decisions on which projects would be included and which projects could not be included in this bond ask. And the team overwhelmingly used a guiding principle, rose to the top, as improve facility conditions, and very close second was safety and security, upgrading safety and security. And then there was another, the other priority was on improving outdoor learning facilities. I just want to reiterate, all of these are important. We recognize the importance of all of these. This was just an added data point to help us make those decisions when we have to start deciding like what projects are in and what projects are out. So you see expanding early education is on here, parity across the district, multiple issues with one project. So they're thinking about smart ways to spend your funds as well, not just what the projects would be. So then we get to the hard part. So after all of the guiding principles, after we get to listen to all the information and all the guiding principles, we had to start looking at numbers. And we broke into, so it's very difficult for anyone to grasp the number of projects and the dollars associated with those. So what we did instead was we started to break down the list of projects by project type. It was more helpful for the group to understand where buckets of money might be going based on a project type versus, an individual, like one door lock. It's easier to say, these are safety and security issues. And given, at the time, we were looking at a few different scenarios in terms of an amount of a bond spend. And we looked at $350, $420, and $490. And in the $490 category, which is where everyone was leaning toward, each group, so there were 5 groups, each broke out and made determinations on the amount of dollars that they would spend by project group. And when we added those, or averaged those together, in order to build consensus, we averaged those together and looked at any differences and then had conversations about where we saw differences between the average and the groups. So that's what these highlighted numbers are, is like where one group looked like they were willing to spend a lot more or a lot less in one project. And we worked really hard to build consensus. We didn't want anyone to walk out of the group feeling like they hadn't gotten their way. We wanted to make sure everyone felt really heard. And so that's what, basically this meeting really focused on that conversation and bringing everyone together around that. And so we left with consensus from that meeting. Then we went through, and actually this is where I'm going to go. Then between those two, between the meeting where we got to the high level priority, or the 490 ask, there was more work to be done. So continual cost revisions, costs are coming in all the time, and especially on the building improvement projects. We also, the capital projects, and with the help of OAC, reviewed all the projects against various funding sources. Is there, asking ourselves, is there any way that another funding source might pay for some of these projects? We want to make sure we're doing the right thing for bond dollars with bond projects. There was also, this is a kind of a side note, but there was one project that was listed as a district-wide growth project that was really a facility improvement project, even though it affects the fuel tank compliance, even though it affects all of districts because it affects your transportation. We really saw it more as a facility improvement, so we moved that into a different project bucket, which affected the averages. And then we started to think about overhead. In order to be smart with your dollars, you can't just look at the costs of the projects. You have to look at the costs, the soft costs is what we call them, basically, the cost that it takes to run the projects. There are people that have to go out and manage these projects, manage the hiring or procurement of the teams that work on them, but also, manage invoices, make sure all the proper documentation is followed. It takes a lot of people to do that, especially with such a large dollar amount. So we wanted to make sure that overhead was captured here, that we were being responsible in that way. And then finally, continued discussions were happening within the district, and because of all of these different changes or developments, decided that $495 million was going to be the appropriate amount to ask for, based on the projects, plus the overhead, plus the understanding of the market that we're in, and making sure that we're being really responsible with our dollars. And so now, I'll go back to this slide, because between this is what we started to look at. So the average from the previous meeting on the left got us to about the 480. You can see even the 489 million, we still couldn't quite get down to that 450. So we went back and after reviewing all of those, everything that I talked about on the previous slide, we landed on 450, but plus the overhead ended up bringing us right in at the 495. And so the final results came as we, then we went through and needed to come up with a list of actual projects to help everybody understand what was in and what was out after that exercise. And we, again, by project type, helped everyone understand what is the list of projects and what is the amount of money being allocated for each of those project types. And the reason this pyramid is being shown is because we wanted to show that we are capturing all of the priorities. So we broke everything in all buckets, into 3 priorities, except for student health and safety. And student health and safety, because that is because we consider that to be top priority of all of our project types, we captured every priority or every project within that. And so they only had project priority 1 and 2. We captured all of those in this ask. And then we went to facility improvements, and we were able to capture many projects, all of priority 1 and 2, and many projects out of priority 3. And so you can see those listed here. Technology, we were able to capture priority 1 and 2. There was an additional project in technology that was a very high dollar amount, but did not see it as an urgent ask. So that was one of the ones that got shifted whenever we went back to our guiding principles to help us discern what the amount would be for technology. And outdoor improvements, here we captured all of priority 1 and 2. There was a third priority that was a mini pitch soccer for elementary school, which again, given our needs, decided that might be in a future ask. And then what we're calling district-wide program growth, not to be confused with growth, because it's not about added students, it's about the growth of your programs. And so here, these are things like early learn. All of the previous projects we talked about were early learning in elementary schools. When you reboundary your district, you're going to have some available space at the elementary schools, which creates an opportunity for your pre-Ks possibly to expand that program. And so we're looking at the spaces that that will be left after the reboundering, and opportunities there to expand your programs as requested by the district leaders. And then a district-wide furniture replacement. So all of these really apply to every single school in the district. And this is ultimately what your map looks like. Because one of those priorities, one of those guiding principles, we really want to focus on giving every school a project, and letting every school be touched in the district. And you'll see here that the projects by type, so you could look at your school and say, oh, I go to Carriage Crest, and seeing what types of projects they are, or you could look at the map, so depending on whether you're more of a spreadsheet reader or more of a map reader, you can look and kind of hone in either district-wide or on your school specifically. And that's the end.
Thank you very much, Ashley. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to our Associate Superintendent of Finance, Ben Rarick, who is joining us via Zoom. So Ben, I can click through the slides for you if you just let me know when you want me to change slides.
That would be great. Thank you for your indulgence in attending virtually this evening, as I'm feeling under the weather. And if I have a coughing fit, I'll quickly mute myself. But I think I only have 4 or 5 slides here. I think what we want the board to understand is that with any bond authorization ballot measure, there's a financial plan that goes behind it. And that financial plan is structured around the amount of the total sales that the board anticipates doing. It also anticipates the timing of how frequently the board would plan on going back to the community for bond measures. And so with that in mind, I'm going to go over some key assumptions that accompany this package. The first is an idea of going out in the spring of 2023 for a total bond authorization of $495 million. We'll talk about that amount in a little bit later. A key consideration when we're talking about tax rates here is assessed property valuation growth in Kent. As you know, property values, as you've been hearing, I think over the last couple of years, property values are one part of the equation that determines property rates and ultimately property tax bills. We have unprecedented growth in property values, and most recently we've been given an estimate of 19.3% by King County for the calendar year 2023, and that factors into this significantly. And then we also make assumptions about our other levies which contribute to our tax rate. So we're not really assuming any major changes in our other levies, be it our regular M&L levy or our capital tech levy at this time. And then we also have to make assumptions about how interest rates will fluctuate over time. And we're in an environment now where interest rates are going up, so you see that reflected. Can you take me to the next slide, Lee? So I hope you can see that, but if you take the assumptions that were overviewed on the previous slide, it produces a set of projections such as this that you see represented graphically there on the bottom of the sheet. Now, I can't see you guys very well, but unless you interject, I'll assume you're tracking here. So you're seeing at the bottom, there's a bar chart that reflects a starting point of $3.81. You see that? And that should ring a bell to you because that's historically been right around the total tax rate of KSD that we've managed over a period of time. We've tried to not increase or decrease that tax rate. Because of the very significant increase in property valuations in Kent, just for calendar year 2023, we are planning at this point to bring down, repeat that, not hold constant, but rather to bring down the overall tax rate for tax-paying members of the Kent community. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that their nominal tax bill will go down. It just means that we're not going to try to continue to maintain that same flat tax rate because the growth in property value has been so significant this year, as you saw, almost 20%, that we think it would be imprudent to ask for that kind of money from our community. It's the point where the growth is beyond sustaining the additional funds that would warrant. And so what this would assume is essentially that at $495 million, we try to stair step our tax rate down to about $3.58. And also, another key assumption that Wade mentioned in the beginning is that school districts, and I know we have Mark on the line, and perhaps Mark can chime in here. It's also appropriate and consistent and very common for school districts to go back out for bonds before their community on about a 6 to 7 to 8 year cycle, somewhere in there. That's very, very common. So you'll see on this graph that next funding opportunity would materialize in calendar year 2030. Okay, that puts us on about a 7-year cycle, which is pretty appropriate. And Mark, if you're with us, can you just speak to where that, where that 6 to 8 year kind of cycle comes from and some thought about that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ben. President Ramada, Dr. Vela, and members of the board. It's always a pleasure to be with you, even if just virtually. And the 6-year cycle, to Ben's point, comes from the fact that OSPI funds a study and survey grant every 6 years for studying your facilities, and that kind of kicks it off. But from a practical perspective, it's really, a good question from your facilities team. By the time you do a bond election, you sell some bonds, you design the buildings, you start building them. It's a long process. It takes a while to kind of go through that, and it ends up being about a 6-year cycle to manage those projects over time. So what we try to do when we're selling bonds, and this is what we did on the 2016 authorization. We sold the last part of the authorization recently and asked, when do you think you'll go back out? So we managed that tax rate drop, if you will, for 2024, thinking you'd be going out in 2023 for election. So that's something we manage over time. Just to interject a little bit, I think this is really good news that you can finance these projects with keeping what we would believe you can pledge to district taxpayers to be approximately the same costs that they're paying in 2023 with the new bonds in place. So they're, be maybe adjusted for inflation, enrollment a little bit, but it'd be approximately the same. So, but that's not an accident. That's the result of a lot of planning over the last 3 and 4 and 5 years, and from the direction of the superintendent and board to how to manage it. So I think you're in a really good position that you can ask for this bond authorization without it being a huge additional burden for district taxpayers.
Thanks, Mark. So the key, I think the key concept there I want to reinforce before we go on to the next slide, board members, is, we've spent at least the last 4 years, I think as long as I've been with the district, really carefully honed in on this strategy of tax rate management. Staying right at about $3.08, I think it was $3.83 was kind of our magic number. And this would mark kind of this would mark, no pun intended there, Mark. This would signal a shift in the sense that both by limiting the scope of what we ask, but also recognizing the significant growth in property values, we feel like we can start bringing that rate down. Can you take me to the next slide, please? Okay, so, there's a lot of considerations, board, that goes into what's the correct dollar amount to go out for. The number one consideration is the needs of the kids and the families and the community through these buildings. Like, it's supposed to be a needs-based process, right? So that's forefront. Another consideration to be aware of, obviously, is we know from our history and the history of our neighbors that getting a bond passed is very, very difficult. It has a higher voter threshold approval. You need a minimum number of votes. You also need 60% of total voters. And it's very important. We have, just in speaking with colleagues in neighboring districts who failed a bond, speaking to experts, it's good to kind of be aware of what neighboring districts are doing, because that will in part shape their perception of what's a lot and what's not. So I think part of the strategy here is that we're being deliberate in being, positioning ourselves as reasonable in the context of what I think are the only two large districts that are about to put something on the ballot in roughly the same timeline that we are, and that would be Renton and Highline. As you can see, we would be asking for slightly less than Highline and considerably less than Renton. The caveat with Renton being that they have very, very high assessed value just because of some of the commercial property, obviously, in that district. Can you take?
I might add that North Shore recently passed an authorization of $425 million, but on theirs, they have a history of going out every 4 years rather than every 6 years. So they can make it a smaller amount more often, and they go for every 4 years a technology, operating, and capital levy. So so it's a different plan. It seems to work for them. But these numbers are big, and you know it's based on the construction costs, and I'm not the expert there, but it is kind of what it rolls up to, and it's up to the board, of course, to decide what's the best match for what they believe is the right set of priorities, and asking the voters to support.
Wade, would you be able to, thank you. So board, there's 2 slides in here that are labeled as appendix, and I think we put them here because this is kind of where the financial talk ends, and then we go into the next slide. It wasn't my intention to go over the details of these appendices, but to the extent that there are detailed questions about kind of the tax rate policy or anything, we can loop back to these appendices and answer any questions that you may have. But on that final Appendix B slide, what I'm highlighting for you there is the step down from that 381 tax rate to $3.58, and you can see how that aggregates among the various tax collection components within that. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but 19%, I believe, is the highest assessed valuation delta we've had, I believe, ever. Is that comport with your understanding?
I'd have to go back and look, but it's been for quite a while. So yes, and it's county-wide, really, King County-wide. There are some districts, believe it or not, that are going to go up 35% next year, and it's a kind of tough measure. There is, of course, if you start reading the news lately, they're talking about a housing slowdown, so these could actually go back the other way if assessed values start declining over time, if there were a recession or something. But the idea is, I think, that the direction we're trying to get to is to try to manage the tax burden and not necessarily the rate, but look at the tax cost for homeowners and try to keep them manageable over time and something they can count on and stable while meeting the plans for the operating and technology needs as well, kind of folding them all into together.
Great. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Mark. I appreciate you guys taking the time virtually to join us. And if you'd hang tight, we'll be on to the question and answer portion here shortly. At this time, I'd like to introduce Vice President of Strategies 360, Senior Vice President of Strategies 360, Leslie Rogers.
Thank you for your time tonight. I'm with a company called Strategies 360. We're based in Seattle, and my work primarily is helping school districts with communication strategies, plans, adding capacity, and a lot of my work is around helping school districts in the communications efforts leading up to a school funding measure. And step one, when we look at how to think about communications, because this is really truly, and when I say communications too, it's of course the communications department, but really everyone. It's kind of an all hands on deck when we talk about communicating a school funding need. But our first step is really looking at research. And so we conducted a public opinion poll of 363 residents in the Kent School District. And this was the last week of September, first week of October. And what we want to do here is we're looking at a sample size of trying to get a full picture of your residents. So what we do is we look at the census data and try to match it. So one analogy I like to use is like a bowl of soup. If you take a spoonful of soup, you know what that entire bowl of soup tastes like. So we're looking for that spoonful of your residents so we can really get some ideas about their opinions and their feelings moving forward. So this was the demographic breakdown when we're looking at who your residents are. Because this is a district-side poll, we are not allowed to ask specifically if they are a voter or not. So we are either doing a landline phone call to a house, a cell phone call, or because we know anyone under the age of 40 doesn't answer their phone, we also do texting. So you can text to an online survey as well. So one of the questions that we really wanted to get into are funding priorities. So this is what residents in your district feel are the top priorities when they look at what you're actually going to spend money on. So safety and security upgrades by far are the most important when they're presented with a list of questions of what they want to spend money on. And, you know, I think this is a post-COVID or COVID, HVAC never used to pop as much as it does now with school districts, but we're definitely seeing people understand the need for healthy air and healthy buildings and ventilation. So HVAC came in as kind of a second there. Updating school buildings and facilities came in too, and you can see the dark blue is sort of a top priority intensity of the feeling, and then the overall is kind of the general how much percent of people listed these as top priorities. Lower on the scale are sort of those learning environment improvements, inclusive playground improvements, and then outdoor recreation areas such as field and athletics facilities. And I can tell you this, we do a lot of public opinion research around the state, and I'll go into districts and they'll say, oh no, we really are a sports-focused district. People love our sports. And almost always, when it comes down to voters and people in your community looking at what they want you to spend money on, fields and athletics is always at the bottom. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do them. It just means we're going to talk about those differently, right? That's not going to be your top point that you're going to talk about when you're messaging going out for a school funding measure. This is the full text so you can look at it. These were the questions that we asked, so you can kind of see what the messages are. So we showed them a series of 6 messages in support of more funding for the district. So safety and security upgrades, the idea of it being district-wide funding, sort of getting to that idea of equity, making sure that there's parity in facilities across your district. The idea of a message around local levies, helping address those funding gaps between what the state provides, what schools need, and that it stays in the community. The health of buildings, again, that HVAC. We tested a message around investing in buildings and facilities. And then finally, talking about tying some of those improvements to success, student success. And so you can see here when we ask these specific messages, again, safety and security upgrades, and then that idea of funding across the district. So really spreading out funding, making sure all students benefit from a funding measure, really were at the top. Local dollars did really well as well as you can see, there wasn't really a message that didn't do well. You know, Invest had a little bit more of a intensity, but still the idea of tying student buildings and facilities to success still did pretty well. As part of the poll, we asked early on saying, you know, what is your perception about funding for the district? And you can see here, 46% of respondents said they thought the district needed additional funding. 46% said have sufficient or too much, and 8% not sure. So that was kind of our clean read on this. And again, this is just sort of a high-level overview of the poll. There's much more data in it. And then after we talked about the poll for a while, so we showed them messages, we had them take batteries of questions, we had them ask an open-ended question about challenges, we did see a bump up. And so that's what we like to see here. So if you have no information, this is that initial read of it. Once you have a little bit of information, they're at 52% needs additional funding. We can't ask outright how someone would vote on a measure or not. This tends to be a pretty good indication when we go back and look at our successes of bonds and levies around that after messaging where they are around kind of a voting history. We also asked residents where they get news and information. This can really help us when we're planning communications. You might be surprised to read that still traditional media tends to be at the top. Social media is there, local television and radio. You might say, we're never in the Seattle Times or local television and radio, but sometimes when people are answering this question, it might not even be what Kent School District, they're just thinking about education in general. And obviously we've seen a lot in the news about education. We do break it down between Kent parents' top sources and the non-parents' top sources. And here's kind of what you would expect to see. So the good news is that Kent parents are getting their news and information directly from schools, from school social media, websites, teacher, principal, and then the district's mailed letter. Non-parents tend to get it from more traditional media sources and on television and radio or from a friend or neighbor. So all this poll information for our next step when it comes to communication, I'm working with Faith on an overall communications plan that will address some of the strategies we see here. We're going to pull out messages, what resonated, what didn't, how can we craft a plan that really takes you between now until April. That'll be our next step, and then working with the district on whatever tools and tactics are needed moving forward. I do think one thing when you're going out for a bond that does need that 60% threshold, it's really all hands on deck and really everyone having messages, continuing to build relationships, going out, doing road shows, even if you're meeting with 5 people, making sure that everyone out there is kind of carrying messages about the need. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. One thing that we didn't mention yet, but you'll see this in your weekly update, is that there will be a second work session for the bond in December. So there's some time for you to process what you're seeing now, what you're hearing now, and then come back and hopefully provide some input and questions between now and then so we can come prepared for that work session on December 7th, because the plan is to bring the resolution to you on December 14th. So with that said, we have time for questions. We've got, again, all of our team members are here. Well, not the entire task force, because we can't fill the room with 30 people from the task force, but the leads of the task force are here and willing to ask any questions you have, and I can flip back through the slides if you have questions about particular slides. So, questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. That's a lot of great information. I wrote like, oh my gosh, so much information, which is good. I like having a lot of information. I noticed that the buildings that we talked about were all the schools, which is great. But even I was curious, because even as we did the bus tour, like the transportation building, and no offense, this building, I'm kind of curious, because I walk in, the reception area is like, you know, Davina does a good job to make it look all homey, but I looked at the furniture, I was like, this is Saved by the Bell. Like, this is the furniture from Saved by the Bell. And so I'm curious if places like central office, I also noticed TOP wasn't talked about. So I'm kind of curious about non-school buildings and with TOP as well.
Yeah, is there anybody from the team that would like to? Dave's like, I haven't had a chance to talk yet. Come on.
He wants to talk.
Thanks, Wade. Appreciate it.
President Amano, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Antello, and Ms. Curry. Yes, great question. So the top building, as you know, those are district growth projects. Those are large dollars. So specifically when it comes to top, we are looking at an alternate program source of space. So we are looking at, no one likes to use portables, but until we can get to that point, you know, we're looking at alternate spaces somewhere else in the district, whether it can be a program, satellite program outside, even in programming and IE, keeping those students at the high school level for another year. That's a you know, an option that we have. And then I'm also looking at maybe some property really close to the top building that we could purchase, and that's my next goal. Because there is a piece of property that's right across the street. It's a chiropractic's office right now, and if anybody's there, we'd like to get that for a little under $1 million, if anybody's listening. But those are some of the things that we are strategically looking at right now. But that dollar amount was a lot. And and it's not that it's not needed. It is definitely needed. But it's something that wasn't such an urgent need that we couldn't find an alternate plan for that building.
And the
Now, as far as the
transportation and-
admin
yes, yes.
campus, yes. So as the admin campus, as you'll see on the slides, there's a new warehouse. And that is not a new warehouse. It is basically an expansion off of our current D building right now. So we're going to go out the back, and we can have just as much space inside going out the back instead of building a new building. Remember what I did with the pool building? There you go. That's what I'm going to do out the back. And then also getting rid of the upgrading the maintenance building. The maintenance building, just like you said, the front building, that's been there. It's been housed with a lot of different things. As you know, Mr. Buzzard and his team are still working in portables. So we would like to come into a hard building. But by getting rid of that and having a little bit of that, of just a few $1 million to get in, we can actually improve more spaces to come in there to allow other spaces in the district to be utilized.
Great.
Yes.
I just want to add to your observation, Director Benno. We didn't want to go heavy on putting money into facilities that didn't house kids.
Yep.
Because when we're going out to our community, we want to make sure that they see and it resonates with them that this is all about kids. Yes, there are definitely needs in other facilities that don't house students, that do house staff, that we will kind of chip away at and try to make those adjustments and try to do some of those smaller projects. But we really want to make sure the bulk of the money was for our kids at our schools.
That makes sense. Thank you.
First of all, I appreciate that we're really taking into consideration the escalation in housing costs and what that factor means to our constituents, because, I mean, I've always voted for the schools, but when I open my tax bill and I see that increase, I go, oh my gosh. And I think also it's in consideration of, you know, everybody pays taxes, even renters. Even though it's the corporation or whoever owns it, they increase the rent to cover it. And we already know about the large cost in rent in this area. And every time rent goes up $100, homelessness increases by 15%. So we want to keep those all intact. I am concerned with any type of increase, and there is going to be an increase because even though you're leveling out the normal rate and bringing it down, it's still going to go up because I've never seen my housing or my land costs go down. And even though the percentage is going down, I'm wondering how we're going to factor in that in our communication.
Ben or Mark, do you guys have a response?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it, and then I might tap Mark in as well. So there is an intent here, Director Hamada, that it's I'm still kind of trying to find the right way to describe this, because there's so many caveats that it's difficult to convey in a public setting and then not have to go back and kind of amend yourself. But let me describe in spirit what this is trying to do. So what it's trying to do in spirit is say, okay, recognizing the fact that we're in this historic period of assessed value increase, we are no longer going to make the tax rate the guiding principle of our operations. Okay. Now you made a statement there that said you were worried, you're sure that it's going to increase and you're worried about increases. Well, so the intent here is actually not to have any sort of material or unexplainable increases, and let me explain that a little bit. So it wouldn't be right or fair or correct to say there will be no increase at all, because there's things that happen, if we get more students, obviously there will be increase. There is inflation factors that, there are things certainly where we would expect to see changes in the actual dollar amount that is collected by the district. That would be like right and appropriate. But what we are going to try to describe is a situation where, you know, except for inflation and except for just adjusting for the number of kids we have, we are actually going to try to keep the total dollar collections roughly constant for this next period of time. Now, the reason that we're thinking through this from a long-term period here, we're talking about, you know, you're looking at a graph that goes out 20,
Right.
30 years, right?
Right.
And what's going to happen, I guarantee it, because the economy works in cycles, is that we could be sitting here in 3 years and talking about plummeting property tax rates. And then all this language that we've crafted, we're going to have to revisit, right? But in the foreseeable future, the idea is that we're going to try to protect property tax payers from, I guess I'll use the language, larger unexplainable increases in their actual tax bill as it relates to the public school. There will be some legitimate reasons why there may be increases, like if we get more students and the per pupil, you know, those sorts of things. But in the main, the idea is to kind of maintain a constancy in that tax bill. Mark, I know you've worked on this strategy with a few other districts, and maybe you've got some language that I know.
Yes, Director Hamada, your concern is a district-wide concern. It's a very common concern. Anybody that owns a household in the district is going to be thinking the same thing. So having a good answer for that would be is going to be important. And as Ben said, the intent is to try to keep the district ask for total taxes be approximately the same over time. And we have a lot of flexibility in how we structure your bond payments. It's a little bit different than a home mortgage, that we can react to those changes that Ben was talking about. And we've done that strategically over the last 4 to 6 years as we've sold the bonds. There's been different targets for the operating levy, for example. So we moved the bond component of your total tax rate to accommodate those differences in your operating levy, and we'd continue to do that going forward. So you'll notice on the one bullet on the bottom says 4% growth in assessed value in 2024 and later. The reason we're using 4% is not because that's what we think your property is going to grow. I think it's going to be above that. The average for 10 years has been substantially higher than that. But if we make the assumption, we're looking at that number essentially saying that the property tax request from the district would grow at 4% over time. If you consider that the district is going to have some new construction over time with maybe 2% per year, that would be at most I'd say a 2% increase in the amount of taxes that you'd be asking people to pay. Again, that's something that we can adjust over time as well. And so when I say approximately the same, I would agree with Ben. It's really an intent over time of what you believe as a board you're promising taxpayers when they're voting for this, and then for us to implement that promise in a way that we think is the best way to do that. Now, I will say that you can only control your tax rates, and you can only control the amount of the total requests. Right. The state has its tax rates for schools, and that's a set tax rate that would go up. So the other taxes can, but you can only control what you can control, and your messaging has to be around that. And also, we're finding this out right now because I do work with both Rent and Highline on the ballot, and they have the same questions coming in the door, real time now. And in Highline, they've got some homes going up 19-20%, but their district-wide assessed value is going to go only up by 5% for the year. So that means some are going to be going down, or there's no changes, so the distribution of those taxes is not going to necessarily be equal either. And that's up to the county, and you don't have any control over that. So the things you can control, and by providing direction through the superintendent and your finance team, is to have an intent to try to manage the burden on the taxpayers from the district's, what's in the district control, to be approximately the same over time, and to try to really keep that in mind, that people are nervous about their tax bills.
Yeah, and consistent with inflation is the other factor. So, we just got notice about a month ago, Director Hamada, that the CPI that the state uses to measure our per pupil levy cap, it keeps going up. So every time that CPI goes up, we can collect a little more. That's the sort of thing that's appropriate, right? That we would want to be able to implement as a district. But so while there are a bunch of nuances here, the spirit of it is easy to convey, which is we're going to drop your tax rate and we're going to try to keep your costs consistent with inflation and student growth. And that's a powerful message that we can send to our community.
All right, thanks, Ben and Mark. Sorry, I was trying to find a way to get in there because we're down to like the last 30 seconds, and I know we haven't had an opportunity for Director Clark or Director Margell to be able to ask questions. So we can either take them in writing or you can say them out loud, and we won't be able to have time to answer them, but you can say them out loud for the record.
Okay, so out loud, my concern is about messaging, and my concern is within the context of what climate change has done to the health and safety of our students within the buildings that we built, is only going to be reinforced as more and more challenges continue throughout the public sphere. Or for those of you looking for humor, I just got back from LA and the pilot said to me on the way down, "Congratulations, you're going to cleaner air."
My comments were also around messaging and the recent strike that we just had, and parents' concerns around money being asked for a district and that balancing out of the messaging that kind of came out of our labor partners, and just how we're going to make sure that we address that, because I think it's on the top of our parents' minds.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you all for the work on this. We'll look forward to hearing more about this. At this particular time, it is 6:01, and we are adjourning to our work session. The work session is adjourned for an executive session for approximately 15 minutes. The purpose of this executive session is to discuss with legal counsel potential litigation and the legal or financial risk of a course of action.
We are now concluding our executive session, and we'll now go into an exempt session until 7:30. See you all then.
Wait.
6:30, my bad, 6:30. I would say that's 6:30. Wow. There we go.
He's right over there.
Good evening. It is 6:32, and I'm going to call the regular meeting to order. And I have a few housekeeping items. Director Farah is absent and excused. Dr. Jewel Harmon, Chief Accountability Officer, Mr. Ben Rarick, Associate Superintendent of Finance, and Ms. Simone Hamilton, Director of Equity and Strategic Engagement, Ms. Antella, Executive Assistant to the Board, and Dr. Larry Nyland will be attending the meeting via Zoom. We're on to 1.03, the roll call. At this time, I will call on Vice President Bento first.
Present.
Director Fair is absent. Director Margell.
Present.
Director Clark.
Present.
And obviously, I'm here. I'd like to now call on Vice President Bento to say the pledge, if you'll join us, please.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, it's good to see some young faces here tonight. Welcome. And older faces too, but it's especially good to see the young faces.
What are you looking at?
They're young to me. All right. Just some process for the audience participation. The purpose of the board meeting is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from visitors. Individuals with items for the board or superintendent must provide the items directly to the safety services staff. Approaching the dais during the meeting is really not allowed. Any items turned in will be provided to the board and superintendent following the meeting. So that's kind of new to our process. We appreciate you if you observe that. Those wishing to comment must complete a comment card and turn it in either before the meeting begins or no later than the beginning of the legislative update. No cards will be accepted once this report has begun. Visitors who have completed a comment card indicating a desire to speak to an agenda item will be called at the portion of the agenda. There is a brief delay in the live stream audio. We will allow for extra time for you to make your way to the boardroom if you are in the overflow room. When it is your turn to address the board, please state your name at the start of your testimony. Public comments will be heard after the opening, during preliminary communication from the audience, at specific agenda items, and during final communication from the audience. Students will be the first to speak on any topic. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You will hear a timer when 3 minutes are up. Please do not use specific names of staff or students or personal identifiable information. Abusive public comments personally directed towards staff or board members will not be tolerated. The president may interrupt or terminate an individual statement when it is too lengthy, obscene, or irrelevant. Per board procedure, written material to provide board members with background information should be submitted to the superintendent's office at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. All right, now I'm going to ask Director Clark if you would read the land acknowledgement, please, sir.
We acknowledge that we are gathered upon the ancestral lands of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe who historically lived throughout the area between the Cascade Mountains and Puget Sound.
Thank you, Director Clark. I'd now like to call on Superintendent Villa if there are any changes to the agenda. Mr. Villa.
President Mata, there are no changes to the agenda.
All right, we're on to 2.0, recognition. And first off, 2.01, our proclamation on American Safe Schools Week. Director Margell.
Whereas schools make substantial contributions to the future of America and to the development of our nation's young people as knowledgeable, responsible, and productive citizens, and whereas the National School Safety Center, state governors, and state school superintendents sponsor America Safe School Week the week of October 16 through 22nd, 2022, and whereas excellence in education is dependent on safe, secure, and peaceful school settings, and whereas the safety and well-being of many students, teachers, and school staff are unnecessarily jeopardized by crime and violence, such as substance abuse, gangs, bullying, poor discipline, vandalism, and absenteeism in our schools, and whereas it is the responsibility of all citizens to enhance the learning experiences of our young people by helping to ensure fair and effective discipline, promote good citizenship, and generally make schools safe and secure, and whereas all leaders, especially those in education, law enforcement, government, and business, should eagerly collaborate with each other and the National School Safety Center and partnership of the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Education to focus public attention on school safety and identify, develop, and promote innovative answers to these critical issues. And whereas school safety programs in numerous schools and school districts throughout the country, along with national programs, are among those innovative answers. And whereas the observance of America's Safe School Week will substantially promote efforts to provide all of our nation's schools with positive and safe learning climates. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors emphasizes the importance of making our schools safe, secure, and peaceful places for learning, teaching, and working, free of drugs, alcohol, weapons, and fear, and proclaims the week of October 16th through 22nd, 2022, America's Safe School Week in the Kent School District. Signed this 26th day of October 2022 by the Board of Directors, Kent School District.
Thank you, Director Margell. We're on to 2.02, Proclamation on LGBT History Month. Vice President Benno.
Thank you. Kent School District Proclamation LGBT History Month. Whereas LGBT History Month celebrates the achievements of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals, and whereas in 1994, a Missouri high school teacher gathered other teachers and community leaders and selected the month of October to be dedicated to the celebration and teaching of gay and lesbian history, and whereas just under a quarter of students are taught LGBT history in schools, and only 4 states require its public schools to include it in its curriculum, and whereas LGBT History Month is recognized to remind both the LGBT and wider communities of the important roles LGBT individuals have played in creating the social, legal, and political worlds in which we live. And whereas the Kent School District Board believes in fostering an educational environment that's safe and free of discrimination for all students regardless of gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Now, therefore, be it resolved, this Kent School District Board of Directors recognizes the month of October as LGBT History Month and encourages the discussion of LGBT history in schools and classrooms during that time. Signed this 26th day of October 2022 by the Board of Directors of Kent School District.
Thank you very much, Vice President Bento. And we're on to 2.03, Proclamation on National School Bus Safety Week. And I'm going to read that. Whereas National School Bus Safety Week is an active and evolving public education program and is an excellent way for parents, students, teachers, motorists, school bus operators, school administration, and community members to join together to address the importance of school bus safety. And whereas Kent School District buses meet or exceed federal and state regulations and consistently receive a 100% passing score in the annual inspection by the State Patrol. And whereas many students begin and end their day with a school bus ride, approximately 8,200 students are transported daily, wow, on 115 routes and 155 school buses traveling approximately 1,366,168 miles each year, and that's a lot of miles, folks. Whereas this year's theme for National School Bus Safety Week is safely rolling to my destination, the board recognizes the high caliber of the transportation team and commends staff for their exemplary job of safely transporting students. Now therefore be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors emphasizes the importance of student safety and proclaims the week of October 17th to the 21st, 2022, National School Bus Safety Week in the Kent School District. This was signed on the 26th day of October by our entire board and our secretary to the board. I would just like to take a moment of privilege to see if there's any transportation people in our room that could stand now, that we could recognize them if there are. And how about we just give them a hand anyway? All right, and we're on to 2.04, our proclamation on National Physical Therapy Month, and that would be Director Clark.
Whereas the Kent School District is committed to supporting students with special needs and providing every student with equal access to education regardless of physical needs, and whereas the American Physical Therapy Association recognizes how physical therapy therapists and their assistants improve people's lives by restoring and improving their abilities of movement. And whereas the Kent School District encourages staff, student, and community members to help increase awareness of the benefits of physical therapy during the month of October, now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaims the month of October as National Physical Therapy Month in the Kent School District and calls upon all citizens and civic organizations to join in the national effort to raise awareness of physical therapy and how the therapists and their assistants improve students' access to education.
Thank you, Director Clark. We're on to 3.0, preliminary communication from the audience. In-person public comments will be made for up to 30 minutes. And the students go first. So, let's see here. Okay, I need a name. Jake Goodell? Is that correct? Come on up to the mic, please. I'm sorry about that, Goodell.
Hello, my name is Jake Goodall. So my question is for your board, it's a JROTC program. So I'm the current company commander for that program, if that program is still available at Kentwood High School. Is there any news or any intact information about instructors yet? About when we can get some or if they're coming at all? That's my question to the board.
Well, just to help you out, we usually don't answer questions up here. We can certainly get back to you with that.
Okay.
It's just been a practice, and I honestly don't know, so I can't. Do you have any other things you want to?
That's it?
That's it? We will get back to you, promise you that. And you can come back to me if we don't.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Love to see our students. Love to hear you asking questions. I think that concludes our students, so now we're on to our adults in person, and that would be Mr. Joseph Simiamo. Mr.
An
Sami?
online student one, I'm sorry.
What?
Online
Oh,
student?
I'm sorry, didn't know that?
Sorry. All right. This student comment is from Luke. My name is Luke, and I am in 6th grade at Carriage Crest. I'm speaking to you tonight about my brother, who is in the support center program at my school. My brother is autistic and is in the 3rd grade at my school. I've been at Carriage Crest for 7 years, and I see the support center kids at my school every single day. They are part of our school. The support center kids come to our classrooms, join us in PE and music, and play with us at recess. Having an autistic brother, I have learned how hard it can be for kids like him to do different things. It is hard for them to change their routines, environments, and schools. Kids like my brother do best in places that are familiar to them with teachers who they know and have known for a long time. I hope you guys don't close the support center program at my school. I want kids at my school to continue to learn to be respectful, to be kind, and to accept kids like my brother. Thank you. That is all for the online student comments.
All right, so now I can go to the adult in person. Joe, come on up.
Before you start my time, I have one thing I have to clarify. My name is Joseph Samomo Jr. I am here as the parent of 2 students in the Kent School District and not in my role as a member of the Covington City Council. My comments today do not reflect the Covington City Council or the City of Covington as a whole. With that said, I'm here to talk to you about the boundaries. I live in the northeastern portion of Covington that is sent to Kent Lake. We are 2.4 miles from my front door to the front door of Kentwood High School. We are 6.2 miles from my front door to the front door of Kent Lake High School. That's the way I drive it. The way a school bus drives it, I am 100% positive is farther than 6.2 miles and longer than the 15 minutes it takes me to get to Kent Lake, and I cut through Timber Lane 99% of the time. Luckily, none of my officers are here to complain to me about that. However, when MGT did a study 2 years ago, and I understand that study was just looked at, was not part of the boundary study that was done this time, but was a resource that they had. They moved my home, my entire portion of Covington, that northeastern part, north of 256th and east of Highway 18 into Kentwood. As was stated last week at your study session, traditionally, that neighborhood has been the Kentwood district. Now, this will not affect me very much this time because my oldest son, who is at Kent Lake, has requested that he stay at Kent Lake. However, there are 130 other students in the northeastern portion of Covington that would like to stay with their friends and go from K through 12 with their neighborhood schools, Crestwood, Matson, and Kentwood. Those 130 include my youngest son, who is a first grader at Crestwood. We have made exceptions in these boundaries for the Birch Creek neighborhood, which is 7.2 miles as you would normally drive it. Again, school bus, probably longer. We've extended the Kentwood boundaries, or when I say we, the Kent School District's team that has done this, which thank you to everyone who was involved in that. That is tedious work. I appreciate it. I just disagree with certain portions. If you made me happy with everything, you would not be doing your jobs. But you have taken from 167 to Kentwood. That is 6.5 or more miles. That includes, and how a bus drives, that could be anywhere from 8 to 10 miles and at least half an hour in a bus, as anyone who's driven those roads knows. I think I hear a bell, so I'll finish up. I'm asking that the school board, when you go to vote on these new boundaries, move the northeastern portion of Covington to their neighborhood schools so these kids can grow up together and make sure that those kids who are near 167 can also go with their friends to school, whether that be Kent Meridian or Kent Ridge. I thank you for your time and have a wonderful afternoon.
A couple more online comments.
I'm back.
We have more.
Thank you. President Hamada, members of the board, Superintendent Vela. I have 2 more comments from adults. Please note that both of these comments exceeded the 450-word limit. However, the full comment will be provided to the board for their review, but I will be stopping at the 450-word mark. Comment number 1 is from Jennifer Satterstrom. As I was looking at the proposed boundary changes for KSD, I did expect there would be a change or two for the boundaries at my neighborhood school. However, I was shocked to see the proposal to remove the SC program from Carriage Crest. I was also saddened to see this change since it made me feel that the kids in the SC program are only numbers to those at district office, when this program is especially more than numbers on paper. I would invite the Boundary team members and the board to visit Carriage Crest and see the team for themselves. They are a very strong and united team that are the heart of Carriage Crest. The teachers and paras in the program have worked hard over the years to build relationships with the Carriage Crest staff. Staff members at Carriage Crest welcome in students in the SC to their general classrooms to provide time for the SC students to be in a general ed classroom. This helps to build relationships with the SC students and the rest of the school and help kids to become accepting and inclusive. General ed teachers are also part of the SC IEP meetings. This does not happen overnight. This takes years to build such trusting relationships. Moving the program to a new school would be starting all over. This is not what is best for SC students or SC staff. Also, most of the kids in the SC program do not deal with change well. Having them move to a new building would be overwhelming for these students. The decision seems to be based on this year's numbers, and as we all know, numbers change from year to year. We may have just 2 students this year who live in the CC boundaries, but that could change next year, in a few years, and so forth. The SC program should remain at CC. I was also surprised with CC down in enrollment and not a high-needs school that our enrollment is being cut with the loss of the Carriagewood neighborhood. I know that parents in that neighborhood had wanted to be moved to Ridgewood, but that was because their neighborhood was being proposed to go to Meeker Middle School when Northwood is much closer. One of the solutions was to move them from Carriage Crest to Ridgewood to fall back into Northwood's boundaries. However, under the new proposal, Carriagewood would attend Northwood no matter if they are at Ridgewood or Carriage Crest. It doesn't seem to make sense them to move an entire bus of students to a new school and to reduce already declining enrollment at Carriage Crest. Our next comment is by Jackie Cavins. My name is Jackie Cavins, and I am the parent of a student in the Support Center program at Carriage Crest. I'm writing to you tonight regarding KSD's proposal to close the Support Center program at Carriage Crest. I have been a parent at Carriage Crest for 7 years, but our Support Center program at Carriage Crest has been at our school for over 30 years. Our Support Center is such an important part of our school. Being a parent of an autistic child, I know firsthand the challenge of finding a special education program that can meet the needs of your child. My son spent the last 3 years in the LINK program at Seuss Creek. While the LINK program may work for some autistic students, it did not work for my child. The LINK program and staff could not meet his growing needs. My son was transferred to the Support Center program at Carriage Crest this year. After only being at Carriage Crest for 7 weeks, I have already seen a dramatic change. He is no longer crying in the morning and refusing to go to school. He is excited to see his teachers and classmates in the morning. He attends math, reading, and specialist classes with his Gen Ed peers, and all the kids know him. They call out his name in the mornings on the playground and come up and give him a high five. This is the reason our SC program needs to stay at Carriage Crest. The students have learned to show kindness and respect to all their peers, not just their neurotypical peers. I've also had the honor and privilege of being the PTSA president at Carriage Crest for the past 4 years. I've worked closely with our SC staff over the years. When news broke last week that our Boundary Committee was proposing to close the SC program at Carriage Crest, our staff was devastated. They did not understand why our district would close a program that has been running successfully for the past 30 years. To say they were shocked would be an understatement. The mood of the entire school has been different. I am a member of the Boundary Committee. I was shocked when I heard this proposal. I am not sure that you are aware, but our Support Center staff at Carriage Crest have announced that they will be leaving Kent School District if our Support Center closes. They will not move to another school. They are a team, and they will leave our school as a team. Our IP team has also announced that they will be leaving our school if our SC program closes. Thank you. I've reached the limit on those, and you will be receiving those as well.
All righty. All right, so now we're on to 4.0, the superintendent's report, and I'd like to call on Superintendent Vela.
Thank you, President Hamada. As we continue our drive towards system coherence, I'm pleased to provide a few updates highlighting this work. We are focused on several student-centered initiatives with the goal of providing the best possible learning environment for student success. The Boundary Change Review Committee is hosting listening sessions to encourage parent and family feedback on proposed boundary changes. The first 2 sessions were held at Kent Lake and Kent Ridge High Schools over the last 2 days. The results of these listening sessions will be presented to the school board to better inform their decision on boundary adjustments, remaining scheduled dates, and dates and times can be found on our school and district websites, and a video recording will also be posted after each meeting. We are providing interpreters for each session and encourage our multilingual families to attend a session or email their school with questions or concerns. We will continue to make every effort to provide clear and consistent communications to all families in our community. As you heard earlier in the work session, the bond planning task force, through a series of meetings, analyzed data produced from both internal and external assessments of each facility in our district. Their goal is to provide a list of capital project recommendations to the school board and keep students as our #1 focus. Along with safety and security and healthy learning environments, we thank the task force for their work to date, and we are looking forward to seeing their final recommendations. As we heard the proclamation for America's Safe Schools Week, I cannot help but think of the school community in St. Louis, Missouri, that is experiencing tremendous loss. Our heart goes out to these families and staff for the death of a student and teacher and wounding of other students this week. There are numerous resources on how to help children and teenagers cope with these incidents. One such online resource is the National Child Traumatic Stress Initiative from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I encourage anyone who would like more information to access this website to learn more on how to support students when talking about these difficult circumstances happening around our nation. Again, we are keeping this school community in our thoughts and prayers as they navigate this devastating loss. On a more positive note, I'm enormously proud of our staff who go above and beyond to support students and families every single day. Tonight, I want to recognize a specific staff member at Daniel Elementary School. Last week, a mother and child were stranded at the school due to a flat tire. The custodian, Sui Peng, and counselor, Sheikh Fall, offered to change the tire. Unfortunately, when they pulled the spare out of the trunk, it was also flat. Due to limited resources, the mother had no way to replace the tire. Mr. Peng drove to the nearest tire store and purchased a tire for this family and then proceeded to change the tire. We thank Mr. Peng and Mr. Fall for their willingness to go the extra mile to help a family in need. This is just one example of how our staff care deeply for their community and a fine example to us all. During my school visits this past week, I was privileged to see our amazingly talented Meadow Ridge staff, Melanie Hanka and Dinah Ladd, who began Aloha Friday by singing to the students and staff over the intercom. They were building a culture of belonging and inclusivity. At Scenic Hill Elementary, I met with behavioral interventionist Jason Russell and visited Hina Betty's third grade class, where students were participating in community circle time, a testament to the importance of restorative practices in our classrooms. This important activity provides space for students to speak from the heart and share experiences together. Ms. Beatty shared how student voice is important and that students are actively involved in setting their own learning goals. Our staff continue to work collaboratively toward the common goal of high student achievement. Last week was National Bus Safety Week. Some fun facts that you heard today, I'm going to repeat them, about our bus transportation include our last part of September, our buses transported an average of 8,380 students on 307 bus routes. And during the last year, our school buses drove 1,366,167 miles to safely transport students to and from schools. We thank our bus drivers and our transportation team for their dedication to our students and families. To that end, I am committed to empowering youth to achieve their goals. I attended the College Success Foundation Empowering Students Youth Fundraising event and learned more about the foundation's services for students, such as advising, college and career skill building workshops, along with campus visits, college fairs, and events for their families. This organization is serving our under-resourced students and families to help them move from K-12 education to either college or starting a career. Sometimes this path is not always clear to multilingual families and students. As I experienced in my own educational journey, with the help of organizations such as these, students have an opportunity to achieve a brighter future. I also want to say gracias to our partners at Centro Rendu, who support our Latino-Latina immigrant families through education, social services, legal advocacy, and leadership development. I was invited to participate in recording a message to celebrate their 10th year of service to the KSD community. We thank Centro Rendu for their commitment, dedication to providing programs that help those in need live healthy, safe, and productive lives in our community. Le damos gracias al Centro Rendu por su compromiso y dedicación a proveer programas en nuestra comunidad a los que necesitan ayuda para que puedan vivir vidas saludables, seguras, y productivas. Finally, this evening, I want to affirm our district's commitment to our core values of equity, excellence, and community. As a district, we remain unwavering in our commitment to equity, inclusion, belonging, and continuous improvement for all KSD students to feel seen and welcome, and to know that they belong. To accomplish this goal, we are asking our parents and community members to consider joining the Equity Council and continue this important work. Applications are being accepted until November 4th, and details can be found on our website. Diversity is at the heart of our KSD community, with approximately 72% of our students being students of color, who make up the beautiful tapestry and richness in our KSD community. By working together, students, families, staff, and our community, we will continue to build bridges, every student, every voice, every day. Thank you for your continued partnership, and this concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Velo. We're on to 5.0, our legislative update. This is when you need to have all your comments in. If anybody else needs a card to fill out, just step up and get that and get it in right away. And at this specific time, we usually do have a report from our legislative representative, Director Farah, but he is excused this evening, and he will provide a legislative update at the next regular meeting, so stay tuned for that at the next meeting. Okay. All right, we're on to 6.0, presentation, and I'm going to call on Superintendent Bell for introduction.
Thank you, President Ahmad. I'd like to introduce Mr. Ben Rarick, our Associate Superintendent of Finance, who is with us on Zoom today, and he will be assisted by Ms. Curry with the presentation.
Thank you, board members. Just checking that you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I appreciate your indulgence in attending virtually, as I'm feeling under the weather and may have to mute myself if I hit a coughing fit, but my pleasure to talk to you this evening about a 2022-2023 enrollment update. We've been promising this to you now since the beginning of the school year, and I will be taking you through a handful of slides to kind of show you where we're at. Carolyn, could you move us to the next slide, please? I'm sorry. Thank you. So the first slide is perhaps the most useful summary slide. You'll remember that the school district is funded on an AA FTE basis, and AA FTE means annual average, and that means that every month that goes by, our enrollment, it becomes a rolling average of all of those months. So that now that we're through October, the numbers that you see reflected in the far right-hand bar chart reflect the average of the months of September and October. And then, of course, the next month it'll be an average 3 months, next year average of 4 months, and so on. And so what you'll see here at a high level is that for the first time in quite some time, we did not go down. So that is the optimistic news. At 23,971.5 is our FTE. In the same sentence, we recognize that, okay, although that we did go up a little bit, you can see where we're at relative to where we were in 2017-18. So we see a changing trajectory, but still significantly down from where we were. Carolyn, can you take me to the next slide, please? Okay. Another thing that we're keeping real close eye on through and after the pandemic is the trajectory of enrollment throughout the year. So please focus your eye on the dark blue line, which represents enrollment for this year. And you'll see that we had a decent size uptick from September to October. You'll notice that during the 2021 school year, we did not experience that same shape. So I think we've spoken about this before, but it's not only the number of students that we're seeing, but also kind of the comings and goings of students throughout the year that seems to be changing as a result of the impacts of COVID and post-COVID. Carolyn, can you take me to the next slide, please? This shows the differences between September and October in the last 3 years. You see, actually in fiscal year 21, we went down from September to October, but in the last few years, we've gone up. This year, you'll see that we were up about 320 student FTEs from September to October. That's one of the reasons, by the way, that we only use September enrollment for the very most preliminary results, because October enrollment is viewed as much more reliable, particularly in situations where you have external events around the beginning of the school that might affect enrollment. Carolyn, can you take me to the next slide? Okay. Pardon me. This slide shows projected to actual FTE for the last 3 years. The blue reflects projections. The orange reflects actuals. And what's noteworthy about this year is this is the first year in the last 3 years that our actual enrollment has exceeded what we had originally projected, which is a good sign. Next slide, please, Carolyn. Okay, I actually give you 2 slides here that look almost identical. The first slide is a projected to actual that is drilled down to the school level. And then Carolyn, if you could briefly go to the next one. The next one is an actual to actual. So I'm going to focus on the second one, but I want to explain why you're getting both, because if I give one, I'm often asked for the other. Okay, so Carolyn, can you go back to the first one, please? So what this is showing you, board members, is every year from a staffing model standpoint, we work as a team to project enrollment by building, and then this is going to show you the differences between what has actually materialized enrollment and what we project. And you're going to see on the far left, in terms of schools that have higher enrollment than was originally projected, programs like iGrad, schools like Neely, Kent Meridian, Meridian Middle, Park Orchard. And then on the opposite side, a couple of schools, Kent Elementary and Kentwood High School, that show that for whatever reason this year, and this is something that we're still exploring, show up as enrollment considerably below that which we were expecting. And then the next slide, Carolyn. So this is where we shift from the projected to actual to taking projections out of it and just looking at how many kids were at the building last year versus this year. And you see mostly the same schools showing up on each end of the spectrum. What's noteworthy about iGrad, you see is the far right, left-hand corner, is even though that looks like a large increase, what you're going to see on one of the final slides is that iGrad is basically rebounding to where it was pre-COVID. Can you take me to the next slide, please? And actually, this is the slide that shows that. So on that first slide, if you're reading carefully, it says this is the total enrollment excluding Running Start and iGrad. And that's just simply because that's how the state reports it. They report it as two separate pots. So we always make sure to include a slide that includes those programs, as they are equally important to us as a district. And so what you're seeing here, a couple things. First, let's look at that iGrad chart. We saw a precipitous decline in iGrad enrollments, roughly commensurate with the onset of COVID-19 pandemic. And this year's numbers bounce back, not quite to where we were pre-pandemic, but you can see it's much closer. And what I'd also like to highlight about this slide is the so-called ALE population here. So in actual truth, if you look this up on the state website, all of the students in our virtual academy will show up as ALE. We split this out so you can kind of see it as separate. Okay. So while you see the ALE population declining there since 2018-19, obviously the huge caveat is, yeah, but we've also just established the virtual academy, and all of those students are also part. So we're just shy of 190 students in the virtual academy. And I don't have this number in front of me, but I know that the vast majority of those students are net migrants within our system and are not new enrollees to Kent School District. If that makes sense. Next slide, please, Carolyn. So very briefly, I just wanted to pull out 5 highlights. The first is that we're up about 273 on an AAFTE basis when you just pull up our state report and compare us. So that's noteworthy because it's the first time that I would have had the opportunity to report that in a very long time, as shown by that first slide. As the second bullet reveals, we're down a little bit Running Start, but we're up substantially in iGrad. And again, I see iGrad kind of settling in its pre-pandemic numbers. I pulled out for you from those 2 school level slides some schools that have experienced the largest FTE growth and the largest declines. And then finally, I think the message here is, of course, want everybody to understand and be thankful for the fact that we did experience our first enrollment increase in quite some time. So that's 1A of the message. The second part of the message is when you reflect on that first graph, you see that we're still well below where we were in 2017. So those are the key takeaways for this year, and I'd be happy to yield to any questions the board may have.
Discussion.
I just had a clarification question. The Running Start students that are not considered in the AAFTE, is that the proportion of the time that they're spent in Running Start, but the proportion of the time that they might be in the high school setting, is that considered? So a proportional FTE?
Yeah, great question. So that's a great clarification. So the students that show up as Running Start enrollees in any of these state reports, it has nothing to do with that portion of the day that they're spending in their comprehensive high school. So let's say I'll just take like an example kid. Let's say they're a 0.4 at Kentwood, and then they go to Running Start and they take their credits at Running Start. The 0.4, they just show up as a regularly enrolled Kentwood kid. What you're seeing on the Running Start side is that portion where they're enrolled in the community college setting, and we are sending the money, the basic ed money, with them to that institution, minus 7%.
One of the things that just noteworthy to me is, I mean, we still don't have total answers why we've lost quite a few students, and it's good to see that we have gained students. However, it looks like with the iGrad increase, or getting back to what it was, and the virtual academy, the more programs that we're offering that offer variety in the way they can get their education seems to be important to our students and our kids. Because we all know our kids come with all different circumstances. Some of them still have to work and try to go to school. Some of them didn't make it first time around and they need a little extra time and help, or they need a little more individual attention. And so those programs seem to be building, so I'm glad to see that we're investing in that. And I want to thank you for being on tonight, Mr. Rarick. Even though you don't feel good, you're always so well prepared with information for us. Any further discussion? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
Thank you.
All right, now we're on to 6.02, the outreach program, or TOP, and I'm going to call on Superintendent for introductions.
Thank you, President Hamada. Excited for our board to hear from our top family. I'm going to introduce Mr. Randy Heath, our Associate Superintendent of Schools and Academic Support, who will introduce our presenters today. Mr. Heath.
Wonderful, thank you. Good evening, President Hamada, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Curry. Thank you for allowing us to come tonight. We are kind of starting a series throughout the year that we would like to bring to you and highlight different bright spots in our schools. We have so many that we couldn't possibly highlight all of them, but we wanted to start tonight with the outreach program. And to introduce the presenters, I'm going to introduce our Executive Director of Learning Improvement over the Kent Lake and Academy strands, and that is Mr. Jim Scheel.
All right, thank you, Randy. Good evening, President Hamada, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Curry, Ms. Santello. I am really excited for you to hear this presentation tonight to showcase this really unique program that we have in the Kent School District. And you're going to hear some incredible results that this program gets that frankly are better than just about any results that any similar program across the country gets when we compare. And they have some really unique metrics of how they measure success at TOP. It's a great example of how we support both students and families. There's an incredible family component to the to the outreach program. And it really helps students who really are young men and women become contributing members of our community as they conclude their time in the Kent School District and their sort of traditional education. And if you haven't attended their graduation ceremony or their promotion, I know President Hamada, you were there last year, it is the most joyful event I have ever attended in my life, and I've gone to lots of graduations and other ceremonies, so when that rolls around in June, I know we can only have 2 board members there, but you really do need to fight to be one of those 2 because it is an incredible, absolutely life-affirming event. And so with that, I'm excited to introduce to you the TOP team led by their incredible principal who will guide you through this presentation, Miss Sue Whitehall.
So good evening, President Hamada, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Santello. Actually, Ms. Curry. Just reading. Cool. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to get to share a little bit about our program and to have a couple of members of the family here. This is Andrew Till. He is our curricular leader and a teacher, and he's been at TOP for quite a long time, longer than I have. And this is Nehemiah Falau. Thank you. And Nehemiah is one of our STAR students. So basically, the outreach program, or TOP is what we refer to it, we are a school that serves 18 to 21-year-olds. They're students who have an active IEP, and most of the students have been served in our support center or adaptive support center programs, but not all. They come to us when they have completed their high school program and are ready to engage in what we call transition services. So transition is a set of services, it's not necessarily a place. And so I kind of don't want to confuse those. But the services we provide, or that TOP provides, are adult transition services. So very specifically, the students are coming to get life skills training, work on social skills, but we have a keen laser-like focus on, I think I just accidentally hit that, on employment, okay? And so that kind of describes that. We started, well, TOP has been around for a while. The new building, or the building we're in now, was, that site was established in 2016, but there is a little bit of history. And Andy, I don't know if you just want to just speak to that history.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your kind words about graduation. I've been in charge of that for 12 years. Hate to break the news, Sue is making me hand that off. So we're going to have something even better this year. Also, I want to address Luke's brother at Carriage Crest. We'll take care of you when you get to TOP. Make sure you're working in a big part of the community. Sue asked me to talk about the history of transition, so I went back into the history books, and then when I got here today, she said we had a brief amount of time. So I'm going to skip forward to October 13th, 2009. That's my first day at TOP. That's my first day as a teacher. I don't know if you guys remember that day. It was just a few days after our previous strike. But when I started at TOP, there was, they had already moved over from Kent Meridian, the corner of the lunchroom. I was the fifth teacher. We had 50 students. We had 18 paras. We didn't have an SLP. We didn't have a principal. We didn't have an OT. We had a different psychologist every year. Now, this is my 13th year. We're in a new building. We have 90 plus students, 9 teachers, 40 paraeducators, 2 speech therapists, 3 occupational therapists. We've had the same psychologist for the last 4 or 5 years, and she's awesome. We have a principal. We're actually a real school now. So it's been real fun to go through this whole process of maybe being a little bit of an afterthought to being a real school. This time in the student's life is to help prepare them and their families for life after school. We have a shift of focus from the traditional academics that we teach in school to more functional academic and life skills, things that will help our students be valuable parts of our community as they age. So what we focus on with our kids is work skills, vocational skills, independent living, money management, cooking, hygiene, cleaning, transportation, leisure activities, spending money, budgeting, getting around the community however they can. So we have kids that drive, riding metro, access, whatever it takes. With our families, we need to connect them with the outside agencies that will be with them for the rest of their kids' life. So we're working with DVR, DDA, ARC, Partners for Housing, Social Security, healthcare, trust funds. So our job is wide, and it seems like it gets bigger every year.
It does.
No, you wanted to.
I'll go ahead. So kind of stepping back to the presentation part, we are very diverse. We're diverse in language, race, culture. The reason we're diverse is we draw from every corner of the school district. and bring the students together to have an adult, to be around other adults and have that adult education experience. And it can be somewhat urban, and we have access to a lot of services that way. Our diversity has grown quite a bit over the years that I've been there, and I can't completely explain it, except I feel like we are providing more access to a wider range of students and families. The fact that we have so many different languages is it's something we have to, something that we are working on always improving. Our work with people with a variety of different languages. We have, we connect them to a lot of social service agencies and to community organizations. And in that, there's some complicated processes. So we have really improved, I think, the work that we do with families who English is not their home language. So we already saw this. We actually do have 40 paraeducators, and I put 30 here, but we have 9 teachers. There's a principal, office manager. We have a nurse part-time and a social worker for what is essentially 1 day a week. And then our support staff is our occupational therapists and physical therapists and speech and language pathologists. Our mission is very clear and very focused. We want to build independence, this thing that is so important to all of us as human beings. And we build independence through employment and through community connections. We understand that work is not everything. We understand that some students will work part-time, and some will not make great amounts of money. But we also know that through employment, that's where we build our relationships, that's where we have fulfilling lives, and that's where we make a lot of other connections. So, so we understand that importance, but keep our focus on employment. And Andy spoke to these things already, so we're going to keep going. And our vision, so our mission is independence through employment. Our vision is that we can expand this to every single student who has a disability, that we have a chance to reach out and make sure that they have all the opportunities that should be available to them. And so, so that's kind of our vision. That's what we're always looking at. That's what we're always looking forward to. So I'm going to let Andy talk a little bit about this. We're different than a regular school. Our day looks different. Our goal, my goal, what we work hard on is to try to get students out into the community at least half of the time they're there, and hopefully more. And the main focus of that is employment training. And so Andy, if you'll just speak to some of our employment activities.
Yes, I realized I put my notes on top of yours. Well, first of all, Kent has the largest transition program in the entire state. When I started, we worked with what we called the mild to moderate disabilities. When we opened up our new building, we changed our philosophy and we decided that we would serve all disabilities. So Seattle, Tacoma, Spokane, Evergreen, Vancouver are the next closest districts in our size. We're bigger than all those because they do their programs based on disabilities. They do them at their local high schools, so we do things different here. We're very unique in how many kids we have here. But our basic structure is that we're doing community-based instruction. It is best practice for our kids to learn how to act as adults in the most natural environment that we can put them in. And that is getting out of the building and getting into the community where they're going to work, where they're going to live, and where they're going to have their leisure activities. So our goal is to get all our students is 3 job experiences per year. That's getting out of the building for 2-hour shifts and learning general job skills that they can take along with them to wherever they go. We're dependent on community partners to do this. We work with Walgreens, Tractor Supply, Navigation Therapy, YMCA, SARS. We have sites inside of our district. We'd love to have more, but we work with the Science Materials Resource Center. We run the Kent PTA Clothing Bank, and we work at the district offices. This has been very difficult through COVID because we could not work out in the community. We did everything online. A lot of our community partners had to come up with new policies, so we've lost a lot of jobs that we had before. Marmax, Rite Aid. We used to work at all of those stores around the area. We don't now. The other thing Sue wanted me to talk about is some of our success stories, and I wrote down a whole bunch of them. And I think that you guys would prefer to hear from the latest success story right here. But I do want to just talk about one of our students that graduated almost 10 years ago. He came from Somalia. He went to Kent Meridian High School. You got to hear this story. When he came over here, he didn't know when his birthday was, so he was given a birthday. So he's a January 1st kid. He started in the Highline School District, and they put him in a 3rd grade classroom. Nobody said a thing. When he went to 5th grade, he transferred to Kent. Someone actually looked at his birth certificate, and they looked at this kid that's had 2 years of school. He was from the country in Somalia, no school there. And they said, "You are not a 5th grader. You're an 11th grader." So we put him in an 11th grade classroom. And in that classroom, they said, "Oh, this kid must have a disability because he's immature. He's not at the same learning as everybody else." And so we put him in special ed. I had him at top for 2 years. We sent him down to Skills Incorporated, one of our community partners. That summer, he applied to be a janitor there, and he was hired. He still works there today. This is 10 years later, and he comes back to visit me occasionally. The first time he came back, he was so proud to tell me that they taught him how to read. But since then, he's also come back to tell me that he bought a car, that he's got a girlfriend, he's living on his own. He now is married. He now has kids. And that is what I would consider to be my favorite success story.
All right, and then along with employment training, we do some classroom instruction, but it's not, it's a little different. It's kind of seminar style and kind of as needed, just-in-time instruction. And we made mention of this, but our community partners are one of the most unique things about what we do. And we just work seamlessly with other agencies and businesses. What I would like to do is let Nehemiah, if you're willing to, just come up and share a little bit about going to school at TOP.
Hello, I'm Nehemiah. My experience at TOP is very different from high school. I've learned how to ride Metro. I've learned how to budget money, way more cooking skills than I did before. It's just I like it a lot more. They give you a lot more responsibility. You feel more like an adult than you do a high school student. I think it's a lot better.
Good. Cool. Thank you. All right, and then finally, I just want to talk about our performance. So we measure success in a lot of different ways. But one of the metrics is our employment data. And so every year there's something called the Leaver Survey, and we survey all the students who exited, who had an individual education plan, and we find out if they're working or going to school. We happen to do that also at top for the work we do with the state. So I have these numbers. Well, originally, or when we started, when transition became part of law, providing transition services, the rate of students who were in special education and then exited, the rate of them being employed was very low. And it was very low for a long time. And then it started to improve with these programs and with the laws around transition. But at top, we've seen actually remarkable results. Always, we have in the 60% engagement since we started. Well, that people are like 60%. That is compared to a state average that can be around 40%. All right, and so we are significantly above others. This year, and we're trying to dig in and figure out why, and figure out all the things that we did to get there. We had actually, the number ticked up a little bit, and around right at 90%. So 90% of our students who were in transition during COVID, they struggled through that. They are now employed or in post-secondary education. And so, and that, I think that our staff has done amazing work with them. But we're able to focus. We're able to focus on what's important and get the students there. We are going to continue to try to keep those outcomes way up there and continue to increase that family support, and that's all part of our school improvement plan. So that's the presentation. I guess we do questions. Are there any questions?
Discussion. Well, I have a comment because I was having a down day when I went to the top celebration, and by the time I walked out of there with all the music and all the happiness and the family atmosphere, and I got to learn about a little bit about every student that graduated, from their own choice of music to their videos that you did, and I just thought it was absolutely wonderful. And it's always good to look at the numbers, but when you see, you walk into that place, it was just rocking, it was just happy. I walked out of there just beaming, and I think you all deserve a round of applause for this kind of stuff.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you. Question?
Alrighty, thank you so much.
I did just have one question.
Yes.
Being part of the business community, and this has been keenly on my mind as trying to provide more opportunities within the community to be able to employ people with different cognitive and mental, physical abilities. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you get those businesses involved and maybe showing those opportunities where a business didn't think they had the opportunity, but could really invite somebody into their company and be really successful and part of their family.
Well, thanks. So there's a couple different things. Our partnership with DSHS, there's this job development that happens, and so we partner with them and they help us figure out how to go in and work with businesses. So that's a really important thing. But the people who actually do the setting up, well, Andy. Andy has set up so many of our job sites and gone into the community, and basically it's knowing people, making those community connections, inviting them in to see what we're doing, sharing that experience, and kind of baby steps, like we're going to come visit and see if they're interested in that. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no,
So
this is great.
it's really building a strong relationship and making sure that we can see, both the business and us can see the value in the partnership. No?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. I just invite more companies to find partnerships. I really hope that we have families are in the audience today, listening online, that maybe they have an opportunity within the companies that they work for. I would hope that you would welcome those calls and emails.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. We try to build a lot of partnerships. We can't always use every single one of them.
Yeah.
But we are, we kind of build like a bank of people to work with. And this community is fantastic.
That's awesome.
Really. It's a really good community, really supportive. So, yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
I would say that small businesses have been a big help. So I would say that the more that we can support these small businesses in Kent, the better it is for the people at top, because corporations come and go, and they change one legal policy and we're done for a while. But the small businesses have been the backbone of top for a long time.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay.
Anybody else?
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
for coming, all of you.
Yes.
Thank you. All righty. So now we're on to 7.0, discussion and approval. And first up is 7.01. We've been working on our policies, folks. Third reading and approval of policy 1815, ethical conduct for school directors. I will entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of the 1815 policy on ethical conduct for school directors.
I second it.
Discussion.
Well, clearly, we went through an extensive overview of this in past meetings, and I'm trusting that we have reached language that we can live with and go forward.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of 1815, the third reading of the ethical conduct for school directors that's been moved and seconded, signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions, the motion carries. We're on to 7.02, second reading and approval of policy 1825, addressing school director violations. I'll entertain a motion.
I motion that we approve the second reading and approval of policy 1825, addressing school director violations.
I'll second.
Discussion.
I think the language in the policy is pretty straightforward, and basically calls us to conduct ourselves as a professional board and protective of the needs of the district and education in general.
And just a general comment for the public, we have work sessions on these, and we go over and discuss a lot of the things and try to get all it worked out before we come here. There can be exceptions, but we do try to get it done behind the scenes and bring it up here. Any further discussion? I want to make sure everybody's been heard. I see none. All right, I'm calling for the vote on the second reading and approval of policy 1825, addressing school director violations. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions, the motion carries. We're on to 7.03. Third reading and approval of policy 6700, nutrition, health, and physical education. I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval of policy 6700, nutrition, health, and physical ed.
I'll second for discussion.
Discussion.
Well, but we did have an extensive overview of this in terms of trying to comply also with the new directions from WIAA and conforming with new state law. So I would think that we should go forward with this to be in conformance.
Further discussion.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that our discussion about recess, our extensive conversation about recess when not being withheld for punishment is left in there with, I hope, the promise or whatever of discussion about student discipline and recess for elementary students. So I'm really glad to see that this is here and that promise to discuss that is coming later.
Yeah, and we all know that it really helps our kids, especially the ones that maybe need that little wiggle room to get whatever's going on with them better, that we want to emphasize that they need to have that time. So any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of 7.03, third reading and approval of policy 6700, nutrition, health, and physical education. It's been moved and seconded. Signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions, the motion carries. We're on to 7.04, second reading and approval of Superintendent 2022-2023 annual plan evaluations. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the second reading and approval of Superintendent 2022-2023 annual plan and evaluation.
Second.
Discussion.
Clearly, we have spent significant time on this, trying to bring this into focus. And the need for a more secure platform to basically stand before the public and talk about what we're doing and the fact that we're tracking it and that the superintendent is accountable and that there are realistic goals that come with metrics and the evaluation takes place with a final public statement so that you can annually track, do we know what's going on and how is it going?
I would just comment, there's a lot of work that went into this, and it is by far one of the, no, not even one of the longest document of evaluation I have ever seen for anyone. And so I applaud our superintendent for putting himself against all of these different metrics that will be looked at, and also understand why it's so important, right? And as you do. I also know that with any rubric, it will always be, it's a river that's flowing, right? And so it will continue to move with us as we get better and learn more and do more. And but I'm impressed at where it started and where it's at today. And its length may be something that we can work on over the years.
I agree. I like that this is very different than when our initial conversation talking about the evaluation system. Although I feel like my teacher evaluation is similar, so I can send you my evaluation to look at as well. But also I feel like the indicators at the end, I know we're going to go more into detail about what that's going to look like, because we definitely want this evaluation to be fair of our superintendent. I still feel like it's a lot of things, but I'm sure we're going to kind of pinpoint at our retreat what that's going to look like. So I appreciate the hard work that our board has put onto this and the staff behind the scenes on this. So thank you very much.
And just to piggyback on that, it's been an area that I'm really glad that we did spend the time on, and I'm looking forward to the incremental discussions about this, and was looking forward to our retreat to even get into more detail about numbers and stuff like that, but we will have it eventually. We had to postpone our board retreat, but we'll get her done. And in the long run, it's really totally centered on evaluations for our kids' sake and how they're doing, and that's what we want to really focus on, getting back to the learning community, and getting back to all those particulars and looking at all the information we have. We have a lot of information. It's pretty overwhelming. And this is pretty exhausting list, so, and I think you're up for it, but we want to be totally fair to you too. So I'm pleased with what we have here, and I'm glad to see everybody else has all their questions answered. And I'm just calling for any other further discussion. Want to make sure everybody has their say on this. And it looks like we're done talking. Okay, so I'm going to call for the vote on 7.04, second reading and approval of Superintendent 2022-2023 Annual Plan Evaluation. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions, the motion carries. All right, I'm going to stop on 7.05 because we have a public comment, and that's going to go prior to 7.05 and that's on the new middle school renovation, and this is Timothy Shaw. Come on up, Tim.
Hello, my name is Timothy Shaw, and I had a question on what we were going to do regarding renovation and or construction at middle schools when sixth grade is being brought into the middle schools, because I went to Meridian Middle School, and while I was there with the 7th and 8th grade classes, the school already seemed quite crowded. So I was concerned with bringing 6th grade up into middle schools, how it was going to affect that crowding, and if there were any plans on how that was going to be fixed or dealt with.
Well, unfortunately, because this is new to you, and I'm not trying to say you have all the answers, because it is new to you. I don't think I've seen you in the boardroom. If I have, I apologize. But we don't usually answer direct questions. However, we've been answering lots of questions at our boundaries sessions. We had one Monday and Tuesday, one at Kent Lake, one at Kent Ridge. We have 2 next week. I encourage you to come to those. I think it's Kent Meridian on Monday and Kentwood on Tuesday. And then you can have a lot of questions, and it's more or less a two-way conversation. And also, if you have any questions, that man over there in the suit, and where did Mr. Buzzard go? Oh, yeah, there he is. I thought he ran out on me. Those guys can answer those, and maybe you could go out in the hall afterwards and have your conversation. And this is standard procedure. We're not just not answering you. We do that because we want to get back to you with a whole bunch of details, okay?
I understand.
So thank you for coming in. All righty, so we're on to 7.05, new middle school renovations. I'll entertain a motion.
I move 7.05, new middle school renovation.
Second.
Discussion.
I feel like we've had some great presentations and discussion on this already. And I feel like all this stuff that we've looked at and heard about this new middle school renovation sound great. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate hopefully being under budget on this, and I look forward to this work starting.
And again, and this does play into the student comment, I mean, this is an attempt to try and address the actual housing of sixth grade by redistribution of students. So in effect, Superintendent Vela, I don't know the numbers for the new middle school. Can you give me an idea of how many classrooms we're adding in?
Yeah, happy to call up Dr. Wade Behringer, Associate Superintendent of Strategic Initiative Operations, and talk a little bit about that, although we haven't gotten to some of the numbers, but he might. I think what you're asking is number of rooms and what it can hold, right, and what this renovation will do. Dr. Behringer.
Thank you. Director Clark, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Antello, Ms. Curry. Yeah, so the new middle school, the old Sequoia, the new middle school that's currently housed at the old KPA, Kent Mountain View Academy site off Kent Kangley, has about 42 classrooms. So when you add 42 classrooms to the mix and you adjust boundaries in all of our middle schools to account for sixth graders moving up, which is what we had to do. There was no way that we could move sixth graders up without adjusting all of the boundaries and bringing on a new school to be able to make those adjustments. And so, yes, that does increase the number of students that will be in all of our middle schools to more than they currently are right now. But they would have been ridiculous if we didn't add a new middle school and we didn't make boundary changes. So, thanks for the question. Hope that helps.
Can I ask a question too? And I know that we've had a lot of information, and I've gotten some stuff in my email about like, oh, why are we reopening as a decommissioned or a whatever school? So can you tell me a little bit why Sequoia was closed, and then why we're reopening it at that site?
Sure. And I might have Executive Director Dave Buzzard come up and help support with that. But I can tell you right now, it was never closed. It was actually transitioned from a middle school or a junior high middle school into then the Camp Phoenix Academy. So we always had students in the building. We didn't fully utilize all 42 classrooms because KPA wasn't that big at that time. And then KPA and Kent Mountain View came together. And then when Kent Mountain View and KPA came together the year before last, before we opened up KLA, then they all moved to their new site, which then allowed Top to take up 5 of those classrooms, utilize 5 of those classrooms because of their capacity, and now we have the virtual academy in there. So we've never stopped utilizing that space, as well as a lot of our partners in the community utilize and have utilized that space for all those years. So you want to add to that, Dave?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Behringer. And if I could recall, because I was not here, but our middle school model was 7, 8, 9.
Junior high was.
Junior high. So in 2004, we moved 9th grade to high school. So that left, again, so when you reduce, you take a current grade, which is about 1,900 students out of a cohort, that's about what a school would present. So that's why that building became not vacant, but available for use for different programming.
I appreciate
The building
that.
was never commissioned, never decommissioned. It's always been available. I want to reiterate that to the community members and the board and everybody that's been here. That building has always been functioning since the time it started.
I really appreciate that, because there were some concerns that it was decommissioned and it's bad, but there's always been students there, and I wanted to make sure that we restated that and reiterated that we've always been using it as a building for students. So I appreciate your answer.
Vice President Bentley, that's a great question. I think it's good for our community to know, because I think when buildings either reduce or enrollment reduces and a school does close, you do actually decommission them, and then we've gone through that process before. So I appreciate you asking that question.
Yeah, so I'll jump on that, Superintendent Vela. We have decommissioned a school. Kent Valley Early Learning Center was decommissioned. It was taken off the OSPI rolls, so we cannot count that as being able to serve K-12 students or pre-K to K-12 students. So again, that building was pulled off its rolls.
Well, I just have a comment that I think it's going to be exciting, and we may not have this completely done by the time it opens, but that synthetic football field and rubber track, that they're going to redo all that. I think that's going to be a great place in that area, because there's a lot of need for that. And not only does the school use it, but a lot of the football programs that are out in the area that are not sponsored totally by the schools, but we allow them to use our fields. Adding that is going to be an asset to the community. But it may not be done. You think it will, but when you're not promising.
We're going to try our best to be able to do that, and I'll just take a point of privilege to say this. That list that you see, that this $8 million will cover, I want to make sure that our community, our board, our superintendent, our community, our staff, our students know, this is our way of setting a prototype model of what our middle schools will need to be and look like going forward. We haven't built a middle school since Northwood, so that was our last middle school. We need to come back around and look at what those functional capacity and the functional performance looks like in a middle school. So that's why I'm very happy to be able to do those projects, get that building up to speed. It's going to be a very highly impacted middle school, such
Yeah.
as Mill Creek.
Yeah.
And we just want to make sure that it's a great, welcoming environment. Again, what will that do is now we will have to provide equality
Yeah.
across the district
Yep.
going forward in middle schools.
Any further discussion? All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, so we're on to the vote on 7.05, the new middle school renovations. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions, the motion carries. All right, we're on to 8.0, informational. All right, All Hands Community Interpreting Services LLC contract renewal. Do we have any questions regarding that or anything?
I'd just like to say, my daughter's ASL teacher and also swim coach uses this community service for, as he's a member of the deaf community. And the interpreters that we've been able to experience along the way have been really great people. And I've been very impressed. I know it's hard in particular with when swim times are, that the hours might be hard to sometimes get 100% somebody being able to always show up, but the support that this provides in being able to have a broader base of teachers that really give a lot to our students is so important, and the work that our interpreters do is so important. And I love just seeing the circle that it's providing education for students to learn ASL, that hopefully we can continue broadening those participants within our community. So,
Any further questions or comments? All right, we're on to 9 consent agenda. And, well, first of all, we had a comment on 9.02. We probably want to do the comment before we even vote on what we're going to pull or stuff. I need that card. Thank you. All right, and that is is it Thomas? And it's, help me with the last name.
Lintz.
Lintz, thank you.
Hi, my name is Thomas Lintz. Back in elementary school, I transferred in my the year of my second grade into the Kent School District. I enrolled at Covington Elementary. During that school year, we had the test to select if we would be able to participate in the highly capable program. And as I was eligible, I was transferred to Grass Lake. And from 3rd to 6th grade is the years that I was in the high school, or the highly capable program. I really think that the highly capable program actually helped me. It helped me find peers that I could grow with. It helped me find learning that actually interested me. In Covington Elementary, my second grade year, I often was kind of interrupting class or just goofing around because I completed everything so fast that it was difficult for me to stay on task because nothing was interesting. But with the highly capable program, I suddenly had interest in the people that I was with and the subjects that I was learning. I believe that the highly capable program is very beneficial, and I have heard tell that it is becoming more accessible. So I don't think, from what I've heard, Covington Elementary is starting to allow that for that, so they don't have to transfer students to Grass Lake Elementary anymore. I find it wonderful that it is becoming more accessible and more resources are being spent towards it. And that is my comment.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming in. Thank you. All right. On the consent agenda, is there any items on here that any board member wishes to pull?
yes, I'd like to pull 9.02, the highly capable program plan, and 9.11, 2016 Bond High School field projects.
Any others anybody would like to pull? All right, I'll entertain a motion on 9.01 through 9.16 with the exception of 902 and 911 pulled.
I move consent agenda 9.01 through 9.16, minus 9.02 and 9.11.
Second.
Discussion.
Oh, if I can. Clearly, we're kind of speeding through this, but I would like to acknowledge our partners because among those items are some grants. Once again, we are being supported by the Muckleshoot Tribe and a grant that they gave us supporting our educational programs. We were lucky again to get a substantial outdoor schools Washington State grant, which continues a long program that's been very beneficial to our students. And of course, the Schools Out Washington Refugee School Impact Grant also enables us in terms of supporting our refugee students. So thanks to all those partners.
My only comment, I agree, and it's just also keeping in mind which programs are getting gifts and donations and what programs are not, and making sure that our schools who are not necessarily getting gifts or donations are being equitable in other ways. That's all I have.
Further discussion. All right, I'll call for the motion on 9.01 through 9.16 to approve all of those minus the 9.02 and 9.11. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying aye or nay. Abstentions? The motion carries. All right, we're on to 9.02. I'll entertain a motion for discussion.
A motion for discussion for the Highly Capable Program Plan 2022 through 2023.
I'll second.
And for clarification, we need a motion and.
Sorry, motion to approve Highly Capable Program Plan 2022-2023.
Oh, I thought that's what I was seconding.
Sorry.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we're doing this.
Yep. Thank you very much for keeping us on track, Leslie.
No, I miss a lot. All right, discussion.
I asked to pull this one. The Highly Capable Program is near and dear to my heart. And I would like to, one, just point out for a lot of people that it's much more than just being, and thank you so much for our student that came and spoke, and I would hope that you would agree with this, that it's a lot more than just being harder. It's a curriculum that is educationally appropriate education for our students, that is their right to have in public education. And I think we have some really amazing teachers and schools that support this. And I was very encouraged to hear in the listening session that was last night at Kent Ridge about the possibility of looking at a more inclusive way of being able to meet all of the needs that are currently in our district, and trying to find ways to identify and gain access for other students in different areas and in different demographics. To be very fair, I mean, if you go into the classes in, like any schools in the district, there is diversity within our highly capable programs, and it's very easy to see that. Do we want more? Absolutely. And something that I hope that we will continue to look at and do is finding better ways to be able to test into the program. I would like to see data around the tests that we use and its acceptability for really identifying our students, and then how we allow for parents that this might be a whole new program for them to really come up with that portfolio that we're asking as an alternative, and how often is that used? Is it really still being able to bring in the students that we're looking for? And then The last thing I would like to say is I'd like to be able to hear some data about our school district compared to other districts in the state where the highly capable self-contained classrooms start in 2nd grade. That is the model that you will see in most large districts throughout the state, and Kent stands out as an exception, not starting until 3rd grade. And it can be really hard when you're in the wrong classroom. We want to make sure that we are providing the most educationally acceptable programming for our students and at the time that they need it. And I would like to see some more information around why 3rd and not 2nd.
Thank you. Absolutely. I just wanted to just share that having been a principal of high cap program for quite some time, and also worked with staff in not only just in a highly capable programming, but also for all programs. And I heard you say a couple of things that are important, I know, to me and my staff, and that is making sure that our programs have a process for qualifying that is equitable, that it's also including the demographics that over the years have been disproportionate over time. There's research around that. And our teams have worked on, in addition to that, the process used or the battery of tools to be able to do that has changed over time. And that's just wonderful to hear some of those pieces. But my team is definitely ready to look into some of those things, again, across all programs. So I appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
I have a comment too. I think a lot of times we focus on highly capable and only talk about elementary school. I hear a lot about Odyssey and whatnot, and that's fine, but I think we forget about our secondary students can be in highly capable programs as well. As a person who teaches IB, I always like to, throw that in, our AP programs, IB, et cetera. And in my district, we have, in my school, because we're the only high school in Renton that has an IB program, we do IB for all, and anyone can do the diploma program if they choose. And so I'm a little mixed about testing into programs and things like that. Ultimately, it's a challenge sometimes because when you do testing, only certain students get the program, and then there's tons of inequities. But I understand that the model that we're looking at, doing, test everyone has that choice. But I think also we need to think about who's in our programs, who's missing from our programs, who do we see, who don't we see, and kind of ask the whys of that. Not that I'm suggesting it needs to be, Odyssey for all, but I also think that as we move towards secondary, like what are our minus honors classes in middle school? What are we doing to support students highly capable in middle school? And then also what are we doing to promote AP, IB honors in high schools so that everyone can do something that challenges themselves. It's not necessarily just, testing into a program. So I hear what you're saying, and I think that's important that as we do our screenings that we have everyone that has the ability to do that. And as students get into middle school and high school, that choice and opting in, I think, is also important. Testing is fine, but I think sometimes we take opportunities away from students where students with AP or IB tend to have higher opportunities in getting to colleges or universities, so we don't want to take those opportunities away from students. So I look at my students who traditionally may not have done an AP or IB program, and they're flourishing in my IB psychology class. They love it. They want to go into psychology and forensics, and to me, I think that's a win. And so I think we need to always keep in mind who are we not including in that. You don't have to be an A+ student. Like, I think that there's relevancy in all students having that option at secondary to go be challenged. So that's what I have to say about that.
I just, again, Vice President Benoit, I think you're actually supported a comment I made about looking at our tools that we use to screen, that they need to be comprehensive in that we're not using something that may be biased or that may be excluding someone unintentionally. And we've looked at that over the years, and I think it's important for my team to continue to look at the different tools that are out there. So we have a good comprehensive process and always looking at who's not in it so that we can truly work towards our core values. And so I appreciate the comment.
Thank you so much.
Well, and I just want to add that not only in many areas, but Monday and Tuesday I went to both the listening sessions because I have the privilege of having the time to do it, and I'm a busybody, and I want to know what people are saying, and I want to hear it right from them. And I really think that the one-on-one, where we can have two-way conversations, is I learn a lot more from that by sitting and listening to our people. And it definitely came up last night that there was a lot of interest in the high cap area, and a lot of questions about what we were doing here and there. So, and it appeared to me that there was a lot of people that think there's a lot more room for growth in that area, that they want to see more of it. So I'm just going to throw that out there, that they'd like to see more opportunities in that. And it's always good to listen to our customers. And I did hear a teacher say that a lot of the kids in our district that are going to qualify for this are freeze when it's a test. So it kind of throws all those results out the window. But we do have to have some criteria in all this too, and that's important, but challenging and making adjustments of what we should be about. And we should be listening to our people and our students, definitely. We should be listening to. So come and tell us what you need, guys, and we'll try to accommodate. Not every time, but we'll try to. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call for a vote on 9.02, Highly Capable Program, Plan 2022-2023. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstentions, the motion carries. All right, we're on to 9.11 or 9.11, 2016 Bond High School Field Projects. I'll entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion to delay the vote on this one for a future date.
Okay, now that's different. Paul, I need you. Mr. Rockville, can we do that?
I'll second for discussion.
So, members of the board, Madam President, Paul Brockville, General Counsel for the school district. The question was whether you could make a motion to delay a motion that's presently on the floor. Was that the question?
Yeah, I need help. Can we do that, or?
You can make a motion to table while a motion is pending on the floor, and so long as it's seconded and discussed. The proper motion would be motion to table.
But we haven't made a motion yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I assumed that you did.
We made a motion to just take it off the table.
Okay, that's the only motion on the floor. Then that would
delay,
need a second. You certainly can table a motion at the request of a board director.
So it sounds like I didn't make one that was in order, so I'm happy to.
It's close enough. I think we know what you mean.
Okay.
Motion to table or continue to a date certain. Something like that would work.
And we can just go ahead on that.
You can, so long as it gets a second and there's,
Okay.
it's passed lawfully.
Thank
I'm
you.
seconding.
I would like to have discussion on this one.
Discussion.
I would like to talk about, one, how I absolutely agree that we need to have appropriate fields and projects for students to be able to do sports and athletics. There is so much that can be gained through our sports and athletic programs that go into lifelong skills. In all of the projects that we're looking at, we see our fields, football fields, soccer fields, baseball fields, and I'd like to also talk about something that's being forgotten along the way, which is our swimming and our water polo programs. We've already, as a district, have opted, and one of the only ones in the area that don't have their own pool, and so we're right now using the pools of other areas. And we have good contracts, great relationships with some of the schools that have allowed us to be able to use their pools. One of the ones I'd like to name it is Lindbergh High School through the Renton School District, and using their pools, which is an appropriate pool for a competition pool. It has both a deep end, a shallow end, the ability for the entire team, both the dive program and the swim program, to be able to compete together, to be able to practice together. Unfortunately, we are looking at potentially moving this program I would just like to point out as we look at projects for all of our different programs, that we take into consideration the importance of all of our different sports and that we have appropriate facilities for those programs. Having a swim program in a pool that doesn't have a scoreboard, doesn't have touch pads, doesn't have an appropriate area to do flip turns, especially when we look at some of our swimmers that are above 6 feet tall, trying to flip turn in the 3.5-foot shallow end is not only dangerous, but it impacts their ability to really be able to do their sport well. For many people, swim might not be your first sport that you know everything about, but not having appropriate facilities is like, let's take football. It's like being able to not hear your officials because you can't hear a start if you don't have a PA system. It's like not being able to have helmets when you're tackling somebody because you're about to hit your head on the ground when you do a flip turn in the 3.5-foot end. It's like not having an end zone and knowing where you scored because you don't have a touchpad to be able to touch at the end. It's like not being able to see a scoreboard. So if you did get a point, you don't know because there's nowhere to see it. It's like not being able to practice with your special teams because your dive team can't be part of it, and not being able to have your fans there because you don't have a place to sit. So as we move to give a $3 million budget for fields, which, by the way, I am fully in support of, I just want to make sure that we think of all of our sports programs.
Before we go on here, and I agree with everything you're saying, and thank you very much, Megan, but this already was in a bond list, so I'm not sure of the appropriation.
Let me
help me.
try to make sure that I capture Director Margell's statement around looking at all the needs for athletics or activities as we look at future projects. I'll just put it as projects. This particular one, I think, President Amara, you're mentioning, this is 2016 bond that specifically for fields.
It was already listed and voted upon by the voters.
But I want to make sure we captured what you just shared, that in addition to looking at that, look at other types of activities and sports like swimming is what I heard. So,
yeah, I think what I would say is that if we're willing to spend taxpayers' money, $3 million, that we want to make, and because we believe in the need to have safe and appropriate facilities for doing the sports that we have, that we keep that same level of expectation for all of our sports, and we wouldn't move to inferior facilities when we're willing to spend so much dollars in one area to save a few dollars in another area that makes it unsafe or insufficient place for the sport.
yeah, thank you. I wanted to, I thought you had a question. No, I'd like to bring up Dr. Behringer to speak specifically about the 2016 bond dollars that are specifically for fields. So, Dr. Behringer.
Director Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Antello, Ms. Curry. I'm going to have Executive Director Buzzard join me at the podium for a second. There's two pieces here. The first piece is that we have these already accounted for, voted on, and approved bond dollars to support grass fields, which we've already shared several times that that's not what we'd like to do moving forward. So we'd like to take those dollars and reallocate them to synthetic fields, which is the direction that we're moving forward, because it doesn't make any sense to continue going grass and, no offense, flushing money down the toilet based on the weather and things like that and not be able to access those fields. That's one thing, and that's what we're bringing to you tonight. The second piece is recognizing that the Kent School District does not have its own pool in any one of our high schools, as Director Margell states, and the inequity or the lack of access to a pool that meets the competitive standards, within Kent, right now we have 2 of our teams, small teams using the YMCA, which is several of the examples that Director Margell gave specifically around the YMCA facility itself. We have Kent Ridge using the Lindbergh pool, and then we have Kent Lake using the Covington pool. Because again, we do not currently have, and have not had since we vacated that pool space on that KM, a pool for our school district. So we're kind of spread around in different places. I just want to say for the record that we recognize that not all things are equal when it comes to the pools that we have access to or that we utilize. Director Margell has been communicating with me, and I have set her up with an appointment, hopefully tomorrow, to meet with Brian Smith, our athletic director, to specifically get into detail around her concerns that she has shared around the pools that we have access to right now. But this issue tonight is about the 2016 bond that's item that's already been voted on, and about taking that money and using it and reallocating it for fields, but synthetic fields, not having anything with no lack of respect for Director Margell, but this is not about pools right now. So, Mr. Buzzard?
Thank you, Dr. Behringer. And yes, I hear you loud and clear, Director Margell, and I support that. I think that when we talk about equality across the district with every sport, every pack, every show, every CTE program, I think that is what we need in this district. And I, you know what, I'm a positive person, and we will get there at one point in time. What this is tonight is, in 2016, I wasn't here. And I never go back in history. Dave Buzzard, I really didn't do very well in history. I'm just going to let you know that. Bad subject for me. So I don't do it very well. But what I will tell you is the commitment from me today is to make sure that we're using the community's dollars in the best way that we can. When this was voted on in 2016, it was grass fields. Now, there was a little bit of chatter after that to say, hey, I thought that was supposed to be synthetic. So Israel and I had an opportunity before he was a superintendent to say, you know what, let's make a prototype and see what it looks like. And since then, it's just been that one at KM, now the fast pitch. And what I see is, and I will repeat what Dr. Behringer said, just flushing good money down the drain. We can continue to put grass fields in, and if the board decides to do a no vote on this, we can continue with these last 3 projects and put them in grass fields. But I can tell you, the equality across the district about having equal spaces will come back at some point in time. Because someone's going to say, KM has it, Kent Ridge doesn't have it, Kent Lake doesn't have it, Kentwood doesn't have it. And to the point, Director Margell, Kent Ridge is the one that we want to do first because no one can play on those fields. Kent Lake and Kentwood, even if we were to run out of dollars, and that's in my write-up, it's a possible that we won't be able to do all 3 of them for the fast pitch in baseball. But what we will be able to do is a comprehensive study that already has the designs. We're already ready to go, and positive as Dave Buzzard is about this 2023 bond, I think we can do this. And we'll start with the fields that are not even usable right now. I mean, nobody can use those fields in Kent Ridge. They're being, I can't remember exactly the fields that they use, but no baseball, no fast pitch there.
And Mr. Buzzard, I absolutely appreciate that. I know those fields. I know them very well. I have sunk my shoes into them. And don't doubt that this needs to happen. I also believe that we can wait a week or 2 to make a decision on this one till we get further information. As Mr. Behringer said, that there was a conversation that's set up for tomorrow, so I'd like to allow the time to be able to have that conversation. And this is not just for Kent Ridge, this is for all of our schools to make sure that we have appropriate conversations. I hear it's about fields. There's no reason that it's raining out. We're not going to be doing the fields tomorrow. We could probably wait 2 weeks to make a decision on this and put this on the board agenda for 2 weeks from now. again, I'm fully in support of us having the right fields for our students. I'm also fully in support of making sure that our sports players have appropriate facilities in all of those. And I think waiting 2 weeks to make a decision on that doesn't seem like too much of an ask to be able to have a conversation first with the athletic director.
I think the problem that's lying here, though, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a bond that we have to do what our taxpayers said with this issue.
Absolutely, but.
And that would not include doing anything with pools. I understand the need for that discussion, but, I mean, we are either going to do this in dirt or turf or nothing. The rest of it, you know.
Well, let's make something clear. President Hamada, we're not going to do nothing. We will do something.
Well.
And what I would do is that I can appreciate your passion about waiting for a couple of weeks. And me personally, professionally, I don't have an issue with that. What I would do, though, is that if there's anybody out there listening in the community, make some comments about whether you would want to play on a wet field or a synthetic field. And I look for the community to actually bring in some comments into that.
Oh,
So
and I would 100% agree with them.
Absolutely.
And
So-
I would just say that we can wait 2 weeks to be able to have a conversation with our athletic director and just talk about how all of our sports and their facilities are being handled.
I will leave that up to the board to make that vote.
Right, but we can't change this vote to take on a swimming pool instead of.
Nor am I asking that.
Okay,
All I'm
I thought
asking
that's
for is
what
just
you're-
just for 2 weeks from now, that we make the vote 2 weeks from now.
Tim?
The obvious question, we're talking about getting fields playable for this spring. Is there an impact in terms of delaying this decision?
Quite possibly.
Yeah,
And the reason why is because without this approval in October, I am already I just made a phone call as soon as you said yes to the new middle school. That was me texting my engineer saying, full speed ahead. Board voted yes. So if the board votes yes for this, I will make the next text message to say, full speed ahead. Get the engineers involved so we can at least get Kent Ridge started for hopefully playable of synthetic field in August, September, maybe even October of 2023.
So if I can, sadly, your arguments in terms of swimming as a full regulated facility access is a problem. But none of this money is going to go towards solving that. And if that's true, then that's a separate discussion.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get
And we
at.
need to very simply not pass this motion and come back and pass the original motion.
And maybe some more context to this, and again, I appreciate Dr. Behringer whispering this in my ear. One of the biggest reasons why this is in front of the board, in front of the superintendent, in front of our community tonight, is because of Brian Smith. Our activities director is like, Dave, stop putting grass fields in. Dave, and he's beating his head on his desk every time I see him. So that's the reason why. That's the reason why we came here. And again, you know, I think we need to take a approach not only across the board of making things equitable and equality through there, but we also need to look at it as what have the voters decided today, and what can the voters decide in the future? And that's a big point. And I think we need to take this not only in sports, but we need to take this to theater, and we need to take this to curriculum, we need to take this to CTE, we need to take this for everything, all the way through this district.
And I appreciate him hitting his head, as long as it's also not our swimmers hitting their head on the pool floor.
Yeah, I can't speak to that, but I tell you, and again, maybe that's a conversation that you know, Brian and Dr. Behringer and you can have tomorrow. Maybe there's other facilities, but we heard you loud and clear about that one.
Thank you.
Either way we vote, this conversation is still going to happen with Director Margell tomorrow, right?
So just to be clear about the conversation tomorrow, is one topic, and that is the concern around swimming facilities. It has nothing to do with fields, nothing to do with the topic tonight, absolutely nothing, and no bearing on this $3 million already approved bond measure, so no.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. It has been moved and seconded to postpone or delay the vote on 9.11, 2016 Bond High School Fields projects. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay.
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 I'm abstaining.
Okay, and abstentions.
Abstaining.
So if I'm correct, it passed with two.
No.
Wait a minute.
No, it doesn't pass.
That's right, we got it. Oh, yeah.
So I'll make a motion then that we pass 9.11 2016 Bond High School field projects.
Second.
Discussion.
We've heard it.
You guys are making this difficult to run this meeting.
No, and again, I very much want to go on the record of saying I highly support the idea of that we go to synthetic fields as opposed to grass fields. We just need to make sure that we're looking at all of our sports and our activities.
I ditto that too, and I'm glad that this is on here, and this is definitely something we need to look at, but I agree with Mr. Buzzard said about CTE and theater and music programs. We need to be equal across the district, so I'm glad this is on here. I loved seeing Kent Meridian's fields. I want all the fields to look like that. That's amazing.
Well, and as somebody that loves the grass fields, I've learned that that's probably not economically good in this area. But, and I think I welcome that conversation. I'm glad you brought that up, Director Margell, about a lot more activities in the pool. And I think when they built the Y, it was supposed to be for commercial, or not commercial, but competition, and they didn't do it right.
No, they did not.
Because I was part of that original committee on that, and that was one of the reasons why we were building that Y, was to have that pool, which we needed, but they didn't do that, did they? Anyway, so.
And wouldn't it be great to be able to have just a sport that there's no cuts, and being able to have more students of disability, and being able to have a facility that really respects that and encourages that more. So luckily we have some partners that we already are, and hopefully we can further that conversation tomorrow to make sure that those are maintained and maybe furthered.
Good discussion. Any other further discussion? Seeing none. All right. All those in favor of 9.11, the 2016 Bond High School Field Project, signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by raising your right hand and saying nay. Abstention, the motion carries. All right. Now we are on to communication. And any final communication from the audience, online or anywhere?
No further cards.
Okay, looks like we're a go position to go through that. And now we're on to 10.02, Board Director Reports and Discussion, and we're going to start with Director Clark.
And given the light of time, I'll pass tonight.
Okay.
Also, given the light of time, I will try to limit myself to 3 minutes as we give our community the ability to speak up here, so I will try to do that quickly. First, I want to give a huge shout out to our communications team, but particularly Mr. Behringer and Mr. Buzzard for their listening sessions. One thing that I was able to participate last night at the Kent Ridge one, it was highly attended, and just loved seeing the community out there. We need more of that. And these are really long nights and long weeks for the staff that have participated in these, community members that are part of the Boundary Review Committee that showed up for this. So important to have that back and forth dialogue that President Hamada was talking about, that is in the listening sessions. And I hope we see that model continuing to go forward. And I've seen the head nods of those involved saying how great that they were, and that we're going to do that. So love it, and keep them coming. We've still got 2 more next week. Look forward to having a ton of people there, because this is important stuff and your voice is super important. I'd also like to give a shout out to the girls swimming league meet was last week. some amazing times. Every single Kent school was represented there, and I think it was personal bests of a huge number of swimmers that did a fantastic job, and we have a huge number moving on to districts that are this weekend and at Curtis High School. So if you find yourself available Friday afternoons, Saturday, that's where I'll be. I'm excited to see the performance of our swimmers there, and just what I love about it is the delayed gratification of working really hard and seeing just the incremental improvement, the skills go on in your life. And as a member of the community, I love hiring athletes because of the ability to work hard and just keep going and persevering. And my favorite part of the whole thing was just the cheering on for every swimmer, every student, how great they were, or maybe they weren't the top of the pack, but everybody was cheering them on. So come out to swim meets, they're super fun, and great job to all of our Kent swimmers.
Vice President Beno.
Thank you. Yes. I want to thank the TOP program for their presentation. I think the work that they do is great. I have a brother who has autism and is nonverbal, and the work that staff does to support students with disabilities is amazing. They do amazing work, and I appreciate hearing more about the program, and I'll always appreciate the work that the TOP program does. It's really near and dear to my heart. So I want to thank them for the presentation and for the student, Nehemiah, coming and sharing his experience. He just looked so proud of himself. It was just so great just to hear from students. As much as I enjoyed listening to staff, I really love listening to students. That wasn't shade, sorry. It sounded like it didn't mean to be, but I really like listening to students. I mean, as a job as a teacher, that's what I do. I really enjoy hearing from students' personal experience. So I want to thank them for all their hard work at TOP. We had a proclamation. It was LGBT History Month. There were some great resources at lgbthistorymonth.org. They do 30 days of representation. I do a lot of trainings for LGBT and equity, et cetera. And one of the things that we always talk about is curriculum should be windows and mirrors. You should be able to look out the window and see the diversity of your community, but you should also look in the mirror and see yourself. So as long as curriculum are both windows and mirrors, representation will always be important in curriculum. And I thank the district for that proclamation and the board for signing it. I've been a busy bee personally, and so I also want to kind of highlight, I went to IB training in Portland a couple weeks ago and met some IB teachers from Kent, and so it's great. I always feel like I always connect with the Kent people because I look out for them, and so that's always great to kind of see what is happening at Kent Meridian and their IB program. So that was really amazing to be part of that training and just kind of see what's happening. This last weekend, I went to the State Family and Consumer Science, CTE training, and the conference, and I did a presentation on podcasting with students and talked about the importance of using technology and how we can use technology with the materials we have. It was a very well-attended workshop. It was really great. Again, connected with some Kent Family Consumer Science teachers. One of the teachers at Kent Ridge, student taught at Renton High, so it was great to kind of see her and connect in the Kent School District. And just continuing the good work of CTE. I'm always going to promote CTE. That's just what I teach. I love and appreciate. So it was kind of great to go to that. As a board member, we have a board retreat coming up, I think, question mark. I think it's in my calendar. I was kind of disappointed to have it canceled, but I understand scheduling and stuff. And that's awesome. So I look forward to that board retreat coming up and doing some great work. And then the WASDA conference is coming up as well. I think most of us or all of us are attending that in Spokane. I'm also, again, I don't know why I put more work on myself, but I put a presentation and they accepted it. So I'm presenting about the importance of supporting LGBTQ students in your schools and districts and doing a presentation about that. So I'm very excited that they accepted that. And so I will be presenting, so I'll be working and also doing more work, attending sessions, et cetera. Again, I want to thank staff for all their hard work that they do. And again, educators and students for being amazing, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Vice President Bento. I'm going to be short tonight. I attended the state dyslexia meeting online. I'm trying to learn more about autism and dyslexia and all those programs and the new guidelines that are coming out and all that, because it's an area that I don't know a lot about. And I also had last week I had the privilege of talking with one of our staff members who has some very interesting ideas to add to some of our programming that we might be looking into further. So that was great. They come up with these great ideas, and finding a way to make all this happen is what we want to try to do, if we can find the money and staff to do it. I think one of the things that's been kind of the theme right now is the boundaries. And all my emails and stuff are pretty much directed on that. And not only just the boundaries, but some of the support programs that go on in these schools. It's become, that they're really looking into that and saying how they feel. And attending the Monday and Tuesday night, even though Kent Lake wasn't very well attended, I learned a lot. And I learned about that when I've been going around and saying, why are we putting these kids clear down on 132nd and busing them all the way up to Kent Lake for an hour, and both ways, an hour. And I'm fighting for these kids. And I learned that, hey, the committee already talked to the kids, and they're fine with it. So I need to just shut up, They want to do this. They don't mind getting on the bus and going back and forth to Kent Lake in the transportation, and they're fine with doing it. So I had an outlook like, okay, I guess I don't know what I'm talking about. So I learned something in that session, and we had other parents and stuff. When you see one-on-one a person presenting whatever they're doing about their child or their staff member, you see the passion. And it's different than reading it in an email. And I was really thrilled to see these in-person kind of like two-way conversations. You didn't go in there and get a presentation. You got in there and you got to talk. And I think we've been missing that. And I'd like to see us not only in the boundary stuff, do more on that. And anytime anybody wants to have a Teams meeting with me or phone call or anything like that, if I can work it in, I want to hear from you, because that's how I learn and grow and bring it back here, because it's not about me, it's about you guys. And one of the things I am looking forward to going to the WASDA presentation, and my culminating project is going to be entitled Building Bridges Beyond the Boardroom. And this is something I believe we need to go out, us board directors, go out into the community and bring the community back to us. Because so many of the organizations or the cultures or the diversity, they don't get a chance to come in here. They're either working or they don't know that they're supposed to come in here and talk, or even in some of their countries, they were told to stay away from the schools. So they don't come into the schools and they don't bring their opinions. So we need to say, we value your opinion. This is the United States of America. You're now in the Kent School District. We want to hear from you. So those are some of the things I've been doing and looking forward to that next month. And I want to thank, again, the TOPS program. If you want to have a high day, go to their graduation. I mean, I just can't say that enough. The music that they picked in that and everything was a very, very special. All the graduations were special in my memories, but that one was just very, very intimate and special. And we're doing, 90%. Let's go out and shout about some of the things this district is doing. I'm quite frankly sick of saying everything we do wrong. And I know I sound like I'm a cheerleader, but I think there are things we do need to correct. But we're also doing a lot of things right in this district, and I think we need to applaud that. And I want to thank our staff and all of you tonight for being here, bringing forth your ideas, and caring about this district. We are adjourned at 8:50.